Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 205. My name is NBZ, and I'm joined once more by Bally. He's here.
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How are you, NBZ?
Well, I don't know. I posited a theory to you about how I somehow got drunk from teriyaki sauce yesterday, and I don't know if it's true or not, but yeah, I was trying to make some teriyaki salmon. It was very nice. It was delicious, but there's a lot of sake in there, and I don't know if the sake has third-hand made me somewhat hungover in the morning, and maybe that's true. Maybe I'm making it up.
100 mils of sake is definitely nowhere near enough to even make you feel the alcohol, I feel like.
Yeah, probably not. It's probably all in my head, but I did wake up weirdly dizzy this morning, and I just had to attribute it to something, all right? So that's what I attributed it to. But yes, we're here not to talk about my culinary skills or lack thereof, but video games and the ones that we have been playing, as well as other things and fun times. How have you been doing with video games at the moment, Bally? It's a hard season for us, you know. We have a hard job here playing all the video games.
Yes.
How are you dealing with it?
I'm doing okay. However, this weekend has been taken up by this little thing called the Ryder Cup, which I'm very into, which is 3 full days of golf. And it's one of those things where with like a regular golf tournament, you kind of dip in, dip out, whereas every single shot in the Ryder Cup feels like a really big deal because it's match play golf. So yeah, I'm very invested in that. So that's taking up an awful lot of time. And it looks like Europe are going to get beaten very badly. So well done to America and all this. But yeah. That's fun.
Yeah,
I'm trying to squeeze in some games around the sides, but I'm struggling.
It's hard. It's hard out there being someone who plays video games. the difficultest thing to do. So we are here to talk about playing those video games. And Bally, do you want to let the people know what today's show will consist of?
We're going to do a 2-segment show this week. First segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing. And then the second segment, there was a little Nintendo Direct on a Thursday that we both tuned into. And we've got some thoughts.
Yes, a lot.
There's a lot going on. So we're going to share our thoughts in the second segment.
Absolutely, yes. And thanks everyone for sending in a bunch of emails, either on the Discord or through the email account. We have quite a few now, which is usually never the case. So we will be getting to those as many as we can in the future. So continue to send them in. But yeah, we got a good amount now. So thanks everybody for writing to us. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about some video games. It's rare, to have games that come out that meet your expectations, let alone surpass them. And so this game, Eastward, right? This is a game I've been following for years. I think it was around 2018 where Chucklefish on their YouTube channel put up a trailer for this game, and I saw it and I was like, holy shit, the pixel art on this thing is incredible. This is like some of the best, most detailed pixel art I have ever seen. And I sent you the trailer and you were like, oh my goodness, this looks amazing. It's like Earthbound, but like modernized. And we were excited for this game, I think, both of us. And we're like, okay, well, it's going to come out at some point, don't know when. And, we waited years for it. I think one of us picked it up in a fantasy league like last year or 2 years ago and still hadn't come out. And it is one of those things where, I looked at this game and I was like, okay, it's kind of got action combat and it's got this stuff going on. It's going to be a big, beefy game, like 30 hours. And I was excited to play it, but I was like maybe a bit apprehensive of like, okay, I'm sure this will be good. And it got like decent review scores, but will it be something that I care about? And I'm here to tell you that Eastward is not only good, it is phenomenal. It is one of the best games I have played. It is up there in the echelon of Celeste and Hades, if we're talking about like best indie Switch games.
You were like, Bally, I've not felt like this since I beat Breath of the Wild, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's hot.
After I finished, so let me put this in perspective. I started this game on Thursday when it came out. I had finished it by Tuesday. I'd put 23 hours into it in the space of 5 days. On the Saturday, I sat there and played it for almost 7 hours straight. I could not put it down. After I finished the game, I sat there not knowing what to do with myself and just went onto YouTube and just like was listening to the soundtrack.
Try and find the 4 other people on the internet that had beaten the game.
That, yeah, but also just sitting and just listening to the music and just vibing out and just not... It's one of those things that happens very rarely, I think, for me especially, just because I've played so much stuff and it's hard for a game to really get me like that. And you know, I love playing games, and I always sit down and play them, but it's often like, okay, I got to play something, I want to sit down and do it, but it's not like it's a chore or anything. But often with a video game, I sit down, I'm like, okay, I'll do this for 3 hours, and then I'll go and do something else or whatever. And there are those rare exceptions that are games that just hang on to you and just don't let go. And Eastward is one of those games. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about this game. Bal, you've also played a good amount of it. How far in are you?
Yeah, I'm 6.5 hours in, and yeah, like you, I was just so blown away by the trailers, and I was really concerned, genuinely, that this game couldn't live up to the vibe that those trailers evoke. And so far, 6.5 hours in, I think it's really done that and far surpassed it. Like I can't glow to the same degree that you have, mainly because I've not beaten this game. But 6.5 hours in, I agree with you. Like, it is that good. I was really worried that it could match the characters, the writing, the vibe. I really hope that I would care about like the overall story as well. I'm a big fan of like an overarching story that has twists and turns that I want to know about. And this game, even from the whole of chapter 1, I'm in chapter 3 now, but chapter 1 like really sets up enough mystery and writing and characters and world building that is just so top tier, that is genuinely on a level with Earthbound when it comes to like that strange, weird world. It's got this really great vibe that's just so great. Like, the music is just really adds to that world. And I think John as a silent protagonist actually works really well. And your kind of daughter figure, who's not actually your daughter, Sam, does a really great role as being that kind of side character who interacts and does a lot of the talking for you, essentially. And I think it all just comes together in this really... Like, yeah, mechanically, sure, it's like a Zelda game, but at the same time, this game couldn't be further from Zelda in like so many ways, where it's basically Earthbound with some Zelda mechanics instead of fighting is what it feels a lot more close, instead of JRPG fighting, I should say, that it just feels a lot closer.
Yeah, it's action combat instead of turn-based, essentially. But also, I guess, like, a lot of it is very focused on cooperative, like single-player cooperative play. So in that way, it kind of reminds me of like Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, but except for you're not controlling both players at the same time. You're just switching between them.
Yeah, it's like Pikmin or The Wild at Heart. It's that kind of... you swap between
It's hopping between, or a classic that everyone knows, Cookies and Cream from the Super Nintendo, the famous game where you have like these bunny rabbits on two opposite sides. Or even there's Mario Party mini games, right, where like one person is opening a gate for the other to go through. It's that idea, because often your characters will get split up when they're in kind of dungeon areas and exploring spaces and stuff like that.
And I just want to say the narrative comparison to The Last of Us also just feels quite resonant with me as well, where John, obviously Joel talks a lot more than John, but Sam has, you know this from early in the very, very early, like Sam is like, there's something unique about Sam, and like obviously there's something unique about Ellie, and like you are traveling across the country, across the world, and there's something very Last of Us about that feeling that I really enjoy. And there
is a pseudo post-apocalyptic vibe going on because of this force called the miasma that is doing something, is kind of you know destroying, and is kind of like an unstoppable thing, almost like a zombie apocalypse in some senses, though the areas you go to and the towns you interact with are relatively vibrant and don't feel like the kind of dilapidated, broken down stuff. It's just there is something weird going on that you can't quite put your foot on. And
I'm in early chapter 3. I don't want to spoil things, but like there's just so much mystery about this world and like what is actually going on. And I think chapter 1 does a really good job of setting up just, you know, there's a lot of like lies told to you in chapter 1 that are just like, why are the people in power telling us this? What's going on? And what's the reality? And
because I bought into the like propaganda. I didn't buy into the propaganda. I believe the propaganda to be false of the mayor in chapter 1, right? He's like, oh, and above the miasma will murder you and all this stuff, and I was like, he's just bullshit because he's never been outside. And there is that incredible moment on the train where you burst out, having been underground for the first few hours, into just this sunlight, and it is transcendent in a way that is really hard to describe. It's the way that it works with the visuals, but also the music and how it kicks in. It is absolutely stellar. But then you find out that maybe the mayor was kind of right, because the miasma does exist, so it is one of those weird things.
Chapter 2. My goodness, I love that chapter. I think, yeah, without spoiling stuff, it's just, yeah, I'm still so early on, trying not to spoil the story early on, but like people need to experience this game, and I've been very bogged down by other things and playing stuff like Kena Bridge of Spirits and haven't delved deeper into this story, and I'm prepping myself because I know this is a long game. I'm less good at like absorbing long games sometimes, like you are, MBZ, but like I'm looking forward to like this 24-hour campaign, and yeah, it's just it's rare that kind of a game comes along like this and just kind of really blows us away. Also, it blows us away in a way where it just feels like no one else in the industry is really talking about this game that much. And it's come at a time where there's so many other big games, most notably like Deathloop and Kena Bridge of Spirits, and Lost Judgment's just come out, and there's a whole lot going on that I just think a lot of mainstream reviewers just will not pick up a 24-hour game and talk about it because it's a big commitment. But ultimately, this is, if you do like Earthbound, which I know a lot of listeners definitely will, this is I bounced off Undertale in quite a big way, but this game is just resonating with me on an Earthbound level like nothing else ever has by a long, long, long way.
A lot of that, I think, has to do with the writing and the way that it is both cutting and funny, like there's times at which it's serious, there's times at which it is just off the wall, and the characters as well are just like, you have like Jasper, who is the kind of weird clown comedian guy who like feels like he belongs in a circus almost, and he's definitely like an interesting companion that kind of comes along with you, and yeah, there are other characters like that become mainstays later on in the story as you go along, and they kind of act as foils, as like comparisons, because I think at its heart this game is about like relationships between characters, like whether it be John and Sam or like some other characters that you meet later on. It's about pairs of people in a way, and those kinds of relationships. But for me, I think so much of what resonated was that kind of optimistic spark that Sam has, like in this world that is so off kilter and something is wrong there. And I think this character trope really resonates with me, whether it be like Haruka from the Yakuza series or Nanako from Persona 4, like the young optimistic girl character who just like brings that kind of spark of life and joy, and Sam is just like embodies that so much. She is like literally as well, her hair is like shock white, right? So in this dark underground space, she is literally and metaphorically like the brightness in that darkness, and her character is just so over flowing with life and delight and just joy. And I just love the writing of her character, and there are certain really fun moments. There is a moment where she gets given a gift, and the way she runs around the room just like delighted with it, and then she like shows it off to John in like this custom animation that you never see anywhere else. It lifts your spirit, it just makes you feel really happy, and this game just does a good job of creating those moments, with her especially. And it is interesting because John as a silent protagonist, I wondered like how this would work, right? Because a story that is so driven by its characters and its narrative, how do you do that with someone who can't talk? And there's certainly moments in chapter 2 that maybe feel a bit weird as a result of that. Like there's a character you interact with where it feels like there should be a conversation happening, but there can't be because you're a silent protagonist. But that said, I think you get a real sense of who John is and the type of kind of morals and philosophy, not philosophy necessarily, but what he feels just through the way that Sam interacts with him and the way that you encounter other characters with him. He's almost the most kind of conservative in terms of the number of animations he has. Like there are only a couple. He's often seen like kind of like scratching the back of his head in response to things.
When he walks with his hands in his pockets, I love that animation.
Yes, so nice. He always like kind of wanders around like that, very casual. But he's also he's a very good cook as well, and that's part of the charm of this game. Also, it has a cooking system that is somewhat reminiscent of Breath of the Wild in terms of you get all these ingredients. So you have like, I don't know, fish and mushrooms and potatoes potatoes and onions and whatever.
To the point of giving you like yellow hearts and red hearts, like it's very
exactly
wild in that sense.
Yes, it kind of takes, although I think it does a more interesting job with the yellow hearts, because you can only have yellow hearts if you have enough red hearts to get the yellow hearts. They're not like added on at the end. They are overlaid on top of your hearts that you already have, essentially. And so you can't be in a situation where you're kind of like spamming yellow hearts just to be at infinite health all the time, essentially. Which is good, because I think the game does get challenging later on in terms of enemies and how much damage they do to you. And so having a good backpack full of recipes that you have made is kind of essential, and it really helps in terms of making sure that you're able to survive through all these areas, because the game doesn't actually give you that many rest spots. It will often give you an area with a fridge and a cooking station. The fridges, by the way, if you want to talk about an Undertale comparison, that is the most Undertale thing, which is the fridges are save points, but every fridge you go to has like this weird, like almost philosophical piece of wisdom or something funny, in the same way that every save point in Undertale talks about determination, or like has a like weird kind of just line about some part of life or something that you wouldn't really think about. This game does that as well, and so if you kind of like that, I think that fills that vibe to some degree. But yeah, the cooking stations is where you go, and then you can basically choose 3 ingredients and put anything together, and you'll never get a bad dish. You'll always get something out of it, because all the ingredients interact with each other in some way, because they're put into subcategories. So like eggs and milk will be under dairy, and like ham and steak and stuff like that will be put under
that's
meat.
very like Spiritfarer, actually, where it just sort of has a subcategory for everything. It works well,
right? Yeah, exactly. And so because each subcategory has, this plus this, or this plus this plus this, there is a full kind of recipe board that encapsulates every single combination that you could possibly do. And there are also one-off recipes, which sometimes you'll get a bit of a side quest where someone will be like, oh, could you make this? This is the recipe for it, this, and this. And they are individualized items that you have to get that specific one, and not just one that's from a category. And I didn't fill out the recipe by the end, so the recipe book, there's definitely hidden ones in there, ones that you kind of have to figure out via experimentation, which gets tricky because buying ingredients can get expensive, and your currency in this game, that is salt, is somewhat hard to come by. You find it in chests, and you get like big amounts all at once, like 50 or 100.
Tiny amounts from enemies, like
really small amounts. So yeah, you could theoretically grind for salt, but really I think the game's economy is well built in terms of you have to make choices of like, do I spend this on an upgrade for this weapon, or do I spend it on an ingredient I need? Do I spend it on increasing my backpack size? I felt like the game also always had those choices.
And that fits more into with the narrative with a post-apocalyptic world. I like
resources are just scarce, essentially,
right? Like I like that. It's simple, but I like that a lot when it's that setting.
They never really explained the salt thing. I thought that was to do with the underground more so than anything, but the salt is just a currency wherever you go in the world, so I wonder what's up with that. I do think I'm interested to see how you feel when you kind of get to the end of the game, Bally, because I think similar to Earthbound in a way, right? If I think about what is Earthbound's story, I couldn't probably really tell you. And in the same way, like, there are elements of this that are not really explained, and they are kind of left there as more thematic things, more so than the actual, like, fully resolving into what you could say is a comprehensible narrative. And I think a lot of it is like putting pieces together yourself and figuring out your perspective on what happened.
I mean, so far the story has very much been, we are showing you something, you're interpreting that, and then Sam either like forgets about it or is concealing it, and then the other characters don't see what you've seen, and then you're kind of piecing it together, where the story is taking place on multiple levels and isn't quite as overt as, it should, I don't know, Last of Us or whatever.
Exactly.
But that works for me so far.
That's why I'm interested to see how you feel, because I know that you are not as big a fan of implicit stories as explicit ones, as we know from the end of Inside. I don't think that it will be that level for you, but I'm interested to see how it goes, because for me it strongly resonated, because that's the kind of storytelling that I do like. I far more gravitate to if a game is talking more about themes via its characters, then that's something that I connect with quite strongly, and I think this game just does an incredible job at doing that type of stuff.
I actually think it's something that's arguably fairly unique to video games, where you as the character can experience something that, and in this case, it's incredibly dark, and you're like, what is this? And then you've experienced that, you have all these feelings about it, and then when you speak to other characters, they're like, what's going on? What? I don't know what you're talking about. And yes, you can convey that through a novel or in many ways a film, but there's something about experiencing it through a video game where you've experienced something, seen something in the world, and then life is continuing elsewhere, like unknowledgeable about, they don't know about it, and then that feeling, which is hard to do in an overt way, then they do it in a less overt way, which is good. It just felt so dark and really like, oh my god, I want to know like what is going on here. So I think it's great so far.
Part of the draw as well is seeing new places and new areas. And I think the section of the game you're in, you actually spend a really long time there. And it kind of makes sense when you think about like New Dam City, which is a place you go to, is one of the most impressive displays of pixel art I have ever seen in terms of the density, the look, the way they use lighting in this game for different times of day to change the tone and feel of a place. Rain, like the way atmosphere is built through pixel art is just incredible. And
I can't think of a game that's got better pixel art than this, like easily.
No.
Like, I think this is head and shoulders above anything I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's incredible because it conveys that kind of character design from Earthbound, but then just thinks like, what if we just went to the next level and just completely went crazy with how detailed little things are. There's a tiny moment that is like almost a blink and you miss it early on in the game where you go to find this doctor guy and he has this hole in his shirt, and there's a moment where he takes his arm and he puts it through the hole in his shirt. And that tiny little animation, like, must have taken so much work and thought to put into it. And it is like this throwaway thing, but just adds so much life to the world. And there are so many of those moments. Like, Sam in particular is just, she's absolutely adorable. Her character design, the way she waddles along and her mouth just is like yapping in the background, even though she's not saying anything, you kind of get that sense she's the kind of character who's just yapping all the time, right? And her mouth is just opening and closing and just waddling along, just so cute. But then there are moments where she's like, oh, John, I'm tired, can you give me a piggyback? And then like she jumps on his back and it's just the most cute thing you've ever seen. And then when she's sleeping, she's just like sprawled out on the bed and like her mouth is like going open and shut, and it's just like, wow, they make you connect to this character so strongly. And I guess like that is part of why they made the kind of silent protagonist choice, because you can in a sense put yourself in John's shoes, right? Like that's probably what they were going for. You want to have that connection to this character Sam, who you are taking care of, and I think like it works incredibly well. It just is so well delivered on. But yeah, there are I wouldn't say this is a criticism of the game, but I just wanted, it's one of those things, I finished this at 23 hours and I was bummed out it wasn't 35 hours, you know? And I never, ever say that about a video game. I if anything, want things, like I wanted Lego Builder's Journey, a game that was 2 hours long, to be 1 hour long, right? And the fact that I say that about this game just speaks to how into it I was. Like, the world truly captured me, and I wanted to see so many new places and different things because of how visually impressive it is, but also just understanding more about this space and what is going on here. And I think, like, there is the middle section of the game where you do spend a lot of time in a single place. New things are opening up and new things are happening. But I was at some point like, oh, can we go somewhere new? I kind of just wanted to go somewhere new. And it does happen, but it takes a little longer than I might have expected. And that's not really a critic. I think that's more of my own expectation being projected onto the game versus the game itself.
It's not the length of time you're spending doing the thing. It's the fact that within that time you're not going to a new place. You want just that sense of new to be on a cadence.
Yeah, I think that was the thing, and I think because the game presented a sort of cadence to begin with, I expected it to carry on, and it kind of puts the brakes on a little bit, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think the stuff they achieve within chapters like 3 through 5 or so, where you're kind of spending in that area, is really excellent and like builds a base for what happens next, right? Because you are learning who these characters are and you're finding out more about these different NPCs who are kind of interacting with the main story, and you're really connecting to them, and so that makes a stronger impact later on when you're doing when you kind of come across them again and that sort of stuff, right? So I do think the game is right in making that choice. I just, from a personal level, because I just wanted to keep going eastward, right, as the game is all about, right? The idea is you're on this train and you keep going to different places to the east because something is over on the east and you don't know what it is and you're trying to figure it out. And yeah, that for me was one of those things where I probably projected a bit more of what I wanted onto the game, but that's not to say it was a bad decision. It's just somewhat different maybe than I expected. But yeah, and I think a lot of what resonated with me was just the music as well with these places. Like I talked about the tone and atmosphere, but there are moments where it's, you know, in the evening and the music reflects that, or like there's moments where it's more subdued, and the happy, like joyful moments, like Sam's theme in this game, one of my favorite pieces of music. It is just so boppy and fun. And yeah, I cannot say enough good things about Eastward. I guess we haven't really talked about the actual playing of the game, which is the game runs really nicely as well on Switch, it should be said. Also, this game crashed like 6 times on me, and I didn't really care, and part of that is because it has an incredibly good save system. It auto saves on every single screen you go through, so it takes a while to like load the game back up, but I think the fact that I'm this effusive and yet this is the most times a game has crashed on me on my Switch probably says quite a bit about like how good it is. But yeah, the combat, how have you found the combat stuff so far, Bally? Because I think this is the thing that a lot of people have been talking about as a weaker element to the game, just because it's a little simplistic and it doesn't have a huge amount going on in terms of options combat-wise. That does expand as you get further into the story, but for the most part, like, you never get a way to dodge out the way or dodge roll or something, which would be a bit weird because John's kind of an older man. It doesn't feel like he would be lithe enough to do a dodge roll.
Right.
He kind of like just hits things with a pan. Like, your main weapon is, that's the other thing I love, the cooking pan that you use to make all your meals is also your weapon. And, you know, multi-purpose game design, man, that's what I'm all about. The pan as your weapon and your way to heal yourself is really great. But yeah, how have you found that stuff?
Yeah, it's maybe one concern I have going deeper into the game, where so far I think the combat, you're not really, doesn't feel like you're doing a ton of combat. Like, yes, the dungeon areas kind of feel like a really good length and pace so far. If they get longer and deeper and more dense with enemies and I'm not given enough resources to combat that, I might be a bit frustrating, but so far it's all good. And, you know, yes, some sort of L targeting or dodge roll or something might be nice, but I think for what the game's going for, it kind of works, and like, I don't really mind it. And it's definitely one of those mechanics that clearly a lot more effort went into the characters, the writing, the world, and these are just kind of like a secondary thing, a secondary part of the game, but it still fits into this narrative of this post-apocalyptic world where you are still trying to survive, and there are still enemies and monsters and things that are attacking you. And yeah, I think it works fine for what the game's going for. It's nowhere near like a highlight, but I don't think it necessarily drags the game down yet, for me at least. Yeah,
for sure. There would definitely, I think it gets frustrating at points just because enemies will sometimes swarm you and you'll just keep getting hit and you're like, I can't do anything in this situation.
It's more than respawning that's frustrated me so far, where you go to an area, and I said this off mic, but it's like, when you're going back and forth through an area, just maybe trying to work out where to go next in the puzzle, it's very frustrating where that hub area might have a few enemies that keep respawning, and once you kill them, you just want them to stay dead, arguably, because it's a solid video game loop where you clear out of an area of enemies and then you work out the puzzle. Like, that's a very common thing you see in games, and this game sometimes falls a little flat where, like I said, you come back to those areas and all of a sudden all the enemies are back. And you're like, okay, I just want to sort out the puzzle here and work out where to go next, rather than fight these enemies multiple times.
Yeah, I didn't find that too much of an issue because I wasn't doing a huge amount of backtracking. I think for the most part the game works in a linear fashion with its design, and that's good. And sometimes you will open shortcuts back, but there are moments where it's like, oh, I need the key for this door, so I need to go over to this area to get the key, and then once you have the key you need to go back to the door, right? So
yeah, that's all I mean. I agree, there's not much backtracking at all. It's just
there's not a huge amount.
Minuscule amounts to get the key to the door.
Yeah. Have you done much switching between Sam and John in terms of their kind of co-op puzzle design of like, so she has an ability that is a bubble that will freeze enemies, but she can't actually hit enemies or attack them. And so I found myself, especially later in the game, where there are some quick enemies that kind of dive at you and stuff, switching to Sam to bubble them, and then back to John, who can just smack them in the face as they're frozen, essentially, was my go-to tactic for a lot of the game in terms of that stuff. But I really liked the moments where she's on one side, he's on the other side, and it's like there are these weird kind of bulbous plants that she can destroy but he can't, and then she can't destroy boxes but he can, and so like he'll be on one side and he'll have to like hit a bomb over to the other side because but there's a bulb in the way, so she first has to get rid of the bulb so that he can then hit the bomb over to her side, so then the bomb explodes the things in front of her so she can move forward. And that kind of cooperative puzzle design I really enjoyed throughout the game, and I think it does some cool stuff with it. There are certainly sections where it can get a little timing based, and I think a lot of people in reviews complained about this, but I didn't find it too taxing for the most part, and generally it fit and wasn't badly designed in any way. It just felt like you just needed to be a little quicker that time or whatever. It wasn't overly onerous with that stuff.
Yeah, I've only done a fairly small amount of the kind of where you're in two separate areas linking up in ways, and I love that game design. I think all that stuff is fantastic, and it's very, very Zelda-y, very kind of Pikmin-y, where you are swapping between them, and I'm loving that stuff so far. So if the game has like lots more of that, which I hope it does, like I'm very pumped.
For sure, yeah, it has a good amount of it, and there's also just like when you're both together and you can just switch between the two characters. I think it's really snappy. Just pressing one of the shoulder buttons to switch from one character to the other is almost instantaneous, and that's what you want in a fast combat situation, is to be able to just quickly switch back, and make it work. And yeah, I do like the way the bombs work in terms of you can put them down, but they solve the Zelda problem of like even if they're about to explode, you can still press A to pick them back up again. So if you fuck up and you're like, oh, I missed it, oh, I don't want to lose that bomb, you can just pick it back up and put it back into your inventory, and it doesn't detonate. And that's really like, it's one of those kind of quality of life things that I really appreciated and thought was really good. So yeah, that stuff, I think for me it would have been nice if, say, Sam later on in the game got an ability where she could like dodge, because she's kind of she basically has magic, right? She's like this bubble she shoots out, and like you don't know what the magic is from or like how she has it, but it would make sense that at some point she gets the ability to like do a bit of a dash where she kind of disappears and then like reappears, and I think that would have been nice to have like the melee combat focused on John and like the dodge avoidance focused on her, but they don't do that, and maybe the game is a little weaker for it. But like this is one of those really minor complaints, in the grand scheme of things. I think overall the combat is fun enough, and I didn't find it overly frustrating, but also it was challenging enough to where I had to keep using my recipes to make sure that I was healthy enough going forward. So like it felt like it hit that balance for me relatively nicely.
Yeah, I find you really have to concentrate on enemies, and if you do go in a downward spiral, you can lose a lot of hearts very quickly, and as you say, you need a lot of recipes to
it's definitely worth like paying attention to patterns and being safe rather than like risky, and if you just bum rush in there and just try and smack things with your pan, you're not going to do well. It's much better to be a little more methodical and kind of take your time with it a bit more. So yeah, that stuff I thought was really good, and by the end there are some fun ways in which they subvert it as well, and I do think there's a good amount of gameplay variety. There's a section early on in the game that you'll have done, which is this pig farmer guy, and there's some crabs. Actually, I think this might be in the underground before you even go there. There's a crab section where there's these crabs walking around, and this fruit, sand roops. I think they're sand roops, right? Because you get them as part of your recipes, and there are a bunch like scattered around this area, and there's a hole in the middle, and you have to use John's powered up charge, so he can charge the frying pan to like power it up and then do a really big hit, which is how you kind of knock bombs across to other areas. But you have to do it by getting these sand roops into the hole, and it's like just this little mini game, but it's the gameplay variety that it throws in there to kind of switch things up, and the game does that quite a few times throughout, which is really good. And that's one of those things that I love to see, is making it not just the same thing you're doing all the time, but throwing little mini games in there. And it's one of those things that help break up parts of It Takes Two, right? That game is so co-op focused, but then there are the moments where you get competitive and you do those little mini games, and just it's a pacing thing that works really well. And overall the game is slow paced, right? Like it is a lot of talking to characters and wandering around spaces, but like I reveled in it. And I think one of the things I would recommend people do if you are really into it is after every beat or after you have had a cutscene, go around and talk to every NPC again, because sometimes there will be NPCs that you'd never seen before that just randomly pop up and they'll have a new thing to say every single time. There was this mini narrative that happened in New Dam City. There's this old guy and his robot friend, and they're always talking about like, oh man, we gotta make some money somehow, and the robot guy being like, damn, my wife, she's gonna leave me, and this theme just keeps coming back through. And then hours and hours later, you get this mini part of a cutscene where you see those two characters, and you meet the robot's wife for the first time, and like there's a little conversation there, and that probably wouldn't mean a lot to people if they hadn't been talking to these two NPCs every single time throughout that period, right? But if you have, it's a little payoff, and it's something that is worth doing if you want to kind of really dig into everything this game has to offer. And so yeah, I would recommend just going around and talking to everybody after all the events, because sometimes you'll get mini side quests for it, sometimes you'll get things that you wouldn't have found out about the world, and a lot of it can be maybe similar, and I've heard some people criticize the writing in some ways, but I thought it was just awesome the whole way through, and I just wanted more, essentially. So yeah, I guess the last thing that we haven't really touched on is that there's another game within the game. There's a game called Earthborn, which is basically a Dragon Quest III clone in some senses. It's not the same, but it is that structure of you have 4 party members and they're in the overworld, and the main character looks like the main character from Dragon Quest III, and the first time I saw it I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. And it is a turn-based RPG where you have 3 playable characters in your party, but you can unlock more as you go along. And it's also
they even gave it a year, like 1980 586.
Yes, exactly. And this world, what it seems like from what I learned, up to the point where you are anyway, Bally, I kind of learned that the game seems like it's taking place hundreds and thousands of years after our time, so it is set in our world, because they talk about like, oh, there's this old thing that's like, I can't remember, there was some object that someone was like, oh, that's from the old world, but it was something kind of quite modern. And yeah, it seems like that's kind of the subtext here is that, so this probably is a relic, this game is a real relic from our world. Maybe it is the real Dragon Quest III that they have, and they called it Earthborn. But the game is actually a roguelike, so like you have this overworld that you're exploring and you're fighting random battles, but you have a certain amount of time in which to explore the space, level up your characters, and then the game will automatically take you to the final boss, which is the Demon Lord. And depending on how well you've done, you have these other things called Pix Balls. Pix Balls are basically like amiibo that you get out of capsule machines, and you kind of get this token currency that you use to get these Pix Balls, and they act as items in the game. So collecting as much of those as possible really helps, because then you get more items which will help you against the final boss, essentially, which makes it a lot easier to fight it near the end of the game than near the beginning, because you'll have amassed more characters and stuff like that. But when you inevitably die to the final boss the first time you fight him, you'll restart, your characters are all back at level 1 again, but you will have retained all the fast travel points that you had before, so you could fast travel to areas, and I think you can unlock other characters. The problem was, I was so enamored with the main game of Eastward that I only put about an hour into Earthborn, and I kind of wanted to play all of it. I did want to go through the whole thing and kind of see it through, but at the point where like I would have been best suited to play a bunch of Earthborn, the momentum of the game, the main game, was so strong for me that I just kept wanting to go with that. And so it felt really hard to drag myself away from it. It's also this really weird feeling of the first time I played Earthborn, I was sitting there and like playing this mini RPG, and I was like, man, I've been playing this for like half an hour, and then I turned off the machine and I was like, oh wait, I'm playing another fucking game. I'm like in this other game, and like it's almost like the art style hits you a second time when you like eject from Earthborn. You're like, oh wow, yes, Eastward, this game, it looks like this, not like a 2-bit little tiny sprite thing. It's like
Earthbound clone. Yeah,
right. It's super impressive. Once again, like every time like I ejected from playing Earthborn, I was like, wait, what am I doing? So yeah, and I think like thematically, Earthborn, if you play that alongside the main game, kind of narratively fits a little bit as well. I've heard from people, though of course I didn't play deep enough into it to get an idea. But I think the biggest praise I can give this game is that after I finished it, I didn't want to play anything else, and I wanted to just restart it and like get stuff that I missed, because there were 2 abilities for Sam that I completely missed and never had them, and they would have been really helpful, and stuff like that, and just playing the rest of Earthborn. Yeah, I have not been this kind of knocked off my feet by a game in a long time. I think it speaks to the fact that I beat a 23-hour game in 5 days and wanted it to be longer. So, yes, I don't think I could give this a higher recommendation. If you have any love for Earthbound, if you have any kind of love for like the music of Undertale or like classic RPGs, this is a thing you should be paying attention to. It is a game that you should be playing. So, yes, it comes with my highest seal of
if
approval.
you even like Zelda games that have just a much big emphasis on characters, worlds, and story, you know, it's that. Yeah, it'll scratch that itch too.
For sure. Great.
Cool. I look forward to playing more. Hopefully, I'm as hot as you are on it, but at the moment, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff. Cool. I've got a couple more games to talk about, so let's jump into those real quick. There's a little game called TOEM that came out recently on Switch, and we were given a code by Pop Agenda, so thank you to them for supplying us with code for the show. And I've been playing that as well. I'm about 3 hours into it, and it's a short game, probably like 3 hours you could do if you wanted to just mainline it. I'm kind of doing everything in it, and I think it's because I really like the vibe that's going on. So it is a photography game, in essence. You are this kind of little sheep-like character, and you are exploring these dioramas that you can kind of see from an isometric perspective. One of the things I really like about the game is you can zoom all the way in or you can zoom all the way out to kind of see where everything lies, so it helps you like taking pictures in certain aspects. But when you take a picture, you go into a first-person perspective, so you're looking at the game wandering around with this character isometrically, but then you can take pictures of that environment from different angles if you are in first person. So it leads to some stuff where like your character will go behind a building, but the camera won't rotate around to see where you are, so your character's kind of like blind, but then you go into camera mode and all of a sudden you can see where your character is because of where their perspective is, and you can find hidden secrets that way and that sort of stuff. So the game's also kind of black and white, so it has that minimalist aesthetic. It's a bit of a lighter tone. I would say it's more grey than something like Minute or even Downwell, but it does have like really nice artwork and has that very cutesy vibe to it. Even though it's not colourful in the same way, it has that twee, almost wholesome aesthetic that I think a lot of games are leaning into at the moment. And yeah, essentially it feels almost like an adventure game where you get to these different areas, and the main goal is there's a bus stop, and in order to get the ticket to go to the next area, you have to complete a bunch of challenges in your journal, and you get stamps for completing them. So, you know, you do have you have a photo album where you store all your photos, and there's also stuff where like there are different animals, like there's a toad, or even so because Greg Miller's wife, Jen, works at Pop Agenda. They got a cameo for their dog, Portillo, in the game.
Oh, wow.
And I got a picture of him, which is really fun. You know, mice, pigeons, dragonflies, underwater stuff, fish. So, like, there is a Pokemon Snap element to it of, like, gotta catch them all with all the animals that you find in the world. But that's, like, a side objective. The main objective is the compendium. And the compendium is where it will give you little challenges, like, okay, capture a rad moment, and you're like, what does that mean? Capture a rad moment. And like, what I have liked to do is I like to explore the entire space, so I know all the different areas that you go to, and it's kind of like different. Each diorama like has an arrow pointing that can lead to another one, and so it feels like a whole place just separated by just different screens. And so exploring all the different screens, talking to all the characters, collecting all of the challenges, and then kind of thinking about them individually and thinking, oh, did I see something over there that would match up with what I need to do here? And so for the rad moment, I was like, oh wait, I saw a little girl who was skateboarding and she's doing a grind down a staircase, and so her little animation is she just goes in a loop doing this grind. And so I captured a moment of her grinding on the staircase, and then I went back to the person. I was like, is this a rad moment? They're like, yeah, that's a rad moment. You captured it. So it's like that sort of stuff where it's not always explicit, and it's sometimes you have to interpret like what you have to do, and sometimes it's like there's a hidden like weird cube in the environment, and there are a few of those that pop up where it's almost like cosmic space cube, and if you take a picture of it, it will cause a change that will then allow you to do something different. There's one where you talk to this ghost lady, and she's like, take me on a date, and around the map there are all these different tables with 2 chairs at them, and so you go around the map trying to find the place that is the best for a date. You go to this alley and she's like, no, this is too grubby, I don't like it here. Or you go to this place that is a bit nicer, but there are some like weird people around, and eventually you find a really nice place, and she's like, yay, you took me on a date, and then you get a stamp for it, essentially. So there are some of them that can be a bit trickier than others. There was one that tripped me up in the second area where there were kind of these 3 stamps that I needed at the end, and I didn't really know how to get them. One of them was a snowman who was like, I need a melody, I need inspiration for a melody, and I'm like, how do I give you a melody in a picture? I don't really know how to do that. There's another kind of guy on a beach who has a guitar, and he's like, yeah, I need some inspiration for a song I'm working on. So I'm like, okay, so these must be connected somehow. So I tried taking a picture of the snowman and showing it to the other guy, tried taking a picture of the other guy and showing it to the snowman, being like, look, you are 2 musicians, you should work together. But that wasn't really the case. It turned out that it was this one guy who was sitting by a fountain who, before you talk to him, he's kind of like humming a tune to himself, and out of his mouth, little music notes are coming out of his mouth. So what you need to do is, before talking to him, you take a picture of him as the music notes are coming out of his mouth, and then you show that to the snowman, and then the snowman gives you a tape, and you take that tape to the other guy, and then they get together and have a jam session, and that jam session causes this big fish in the ocean, which you're looking at, and you're like wondering, how do I get this big fish out of the ocean? They give you a power-up, which is like a honk, so you have like a blaring honk on your camera, so that you can like blast at pigeons who are in your way, and they move out the way when you honk at them. And I tried earlier on in the level to like honk at this big fish, and it wasn't moving, it was just in the water the whole time. But that wasn't the solution. The solution was to get these 2 musicians together, so that then this giant king fish jumps out the water, get a picture of that, and it turns out the guy back at the fountain wanted a picture of the big fish. So it all kind of linked together in this mini kind of arc of challenges that you had to do. So some of them are built in that way, where they're all kind of like one thing leads to the other, which then allows you to complete this one task. But for the most part, they're kind of standalone, and they're really fun to work out. Some of them I have looked up of like, okay, I've been around this area like 3 or 4 times, I don't really know what to do in this situation, and so yeah, there are a couple of guides on Steam that I've been referencing to kind of clear out areas. But yeah, I'm really motivated to do all the challenges. They're all really fun to do. And yeah, you could knock through this game in probably a couple of hours if you just did the bare minimum, because each level has like a number of challenges you need to complete to get the bus ticket. So like Stanham, which is the first major area, there are 15 challenges, but you only need like 6 or 7 to move on. So you could just do the baseline ones and then just move to the next area. But I think the spaces are well designed and dense with stuff that you keep wanting to explore them and snap photos and have fun times. And it's really cool to work that stuff out. And, you know, even if you don't, then you can look stuff up, and it's still satisfying to complete it. So I'm in the last area now, which is kind of a snowy area. And yeah, I'll probably finish it up this afternoon and be done with it. But yeah, are you interested in checking this one out at all, Bally?
Yeah, definitely. It sounds... The length is very appealing to me, just like a 4-hour, like very cute photo focused game. Like that really appeals to me, and yeah, I think it looks absolutely delightful, and would quite like to play it before the end of the year.
Yes, I did say, like, do you want this code? Because it's come in.
I'm
if you want to play it.
And
you're like, no, too many games. So I checked it out, and I think people will really like it. It's definitely cute and really, really wholesome and a fun time. So TOEM is great. And the last game I want to talk about is Flynn, Son of Crimson. 3 like really great indie games to talk about today, and Flynn is no different. I really enjoyed this one. It is a side-scrolling action game that you could, I wouldn't say Metroidvania, because it does have upgrades and stuff, but really it is more of an action platformer where you're going from level to level, and the overworld shows it that way. So there are like villages that you can go back to, and you can go back into levels that you've already visited. So if you get like a wall jump power up from later on in the game, and you're like, oh, there was a place I could get to by using that, you can go back to those previous areas. But you are this kind of red-headed kid, really nice pixel art as well, more traditional than Eastward, but yeah, very, very bright and colourful. And it is a really satisfying action game. So you have a sword, and you have a roll, and it does that thing almost like Donkey Kong Country Returns, where you can roll and then jump, and it gives you more of a momentum on your roll. And so it felt really good to move around the spaces, very responsive, really good tight controls. And essentially, yeah, you are kind of going through this world, different levels with different themes, fighting enemies, jumping on things, doing mini puzzles. Like it's very straightforward. I wouldn't say there's anything necessarily unique about this game, but it's really just well executed on every front. It kind of just tickled that kind of... I always want to have a game that is a like a Metroidvania that is just all about just running left or right and hitting things with a big sword and dodging out the way and just doing satisfying combat and
very good
platforming.
Reviews.
Yeah, it did. It sadly has just, same with TOEM as well, both these games have just not done well at all on Steam, and it's a real bummer. I don't think they necessarily speak to that audience as well. They feel much
Eastward
more Nintendo-centric. Eastward is, and Eastward has absolutely destroyed it. It's doing very well. It's blowing up. That game is actually deservedly so getting the love, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, these other two games have not. And I played this on Game Pass, but it is on Switch as well. And I imagine as a kind of pixel art game, it would run perfectly fine on Switch. But yeah, it's you have this big dog who also is a character. In the beginning of the game, the dog loses its powers, and you spend the first part of the game going and getting those powers back. But then you can kind of call on the dog later, and the dog is almost like this super powered up being who can like dash through the air, can walk on spikes without taking any damage, like destroys enemies really quickly, like all these big kind of knight characters who require a lot of like, okay, I'm gonna hit them and then they're flashing, so that means they're about to attack, so roll behind them and get out the way. There's a lot of like deliberate combat, not soulsy, but like you do have to pay attention and make sure that you're not getting hit too much, but the dog just makes a meal out of them, just destroys them, so that's fun as a different element, and who kind of like is part of the game later. But yeah, for the most part, it is a lot of side-scrolling action. It does the weird thing that old games did, where once you go into a new room, you can't go back to the previous one, which is why I lean towards it being more of an action platformer than a Metroidvania, because sure, you can go out to the overworld and then jump back into the level, but there's no way to like go back once you're in the level. So once you've passed a threshold of like, I'm in the next room and it's kind of gone to black and then faded up again, you can't just go back, which is a little weird, but I kind of get it, because it is more about forward momentum and getting through these stages. But yeah, it sometimes shakes things up where, oh, there's a corrupted version of the level and you'll be forced to do that before you can move on. And I thought I'd be annoyed by it, but each corrupted version of the level is very different and focuses on different things. Sometimes you'll be chased by this giant kind of ethereal ghostly axe that is spinning through the air and attacking you. So it means you have to go fast through the level and kind of ignore all the enemies. Sometimes it's more platforming focused. But yeah, I really enjoyed it as a way to like get my fingers to do stuff while I listen to podcasts. It's a really good one of those, and sometimes I just need that, right? Sometimes I just need a, hey, this is a good feeling dodge roll. This is a good feeling attack. You get a big axe later on that does more damage. You get these kind of claws that scratch and are faster, and it's just satisfying to hit enemies and roll out the way and do a bit of light platforming. Just a really solid all-round one of these. And if you are jonesing for something that feels like, I just want to take an afternoon, listen to a bunch of podcasts, or like have a TV on in the background while I play this on handheld mode, it's really, really good for that. I like it quite a bit. And yeah, it's not doing anything innovative, but just good fun. Really good fun. Well-made game. Flynn, Son of Crimson. Probably only about 6 hours or so pretty short as well, and worth checking out, especially if you've got Game Pass. It's on there. I would highly recommend people give that a go. So yeah, not in the same echelon of like, I think we went like quality-wise, like how positive I am from Eastward to TOEM to Flynn, but all three of them, really great, fantastic games. So yeah, it's a good time to be an indie player on Switch right now. If you love indie stuff, then you got just riches aplenty of really great games. So there you go. And that, I think, is going to close out our first segment of today's show. We'll be back after the break to talk about the Nintendo Direct and all the weird and wild things that happened during it. So we'll be back in a second. All right, everybody, welcome back to the third and finale part of today's show, where Nintendo, for once in their lives, graced us with a Nintendo Direct that aligned with our recording schedule. So thank you, Mr. Nintendo, for thinking of us in these troubled times. It's happened a bit more recently, I feel like, so maybe, you know, they've got some people listening. Bill Trinan, big fan of the show, I know, out there just making sure things are happening, and... Yeah, so here we are, the third Nintendo Direct of the year. Who could imagine it, Bally? We went through a whole year last year of just not knowing what was going on. There were barely any of them, and it was a drought for forever. And it feels like we're back to a more regular cadence now. We had the February one, we had the middle of the year E3, and now we've got a September one, and that's pretty good. How are you feeling generally about Directs being back as a thing that's more consistent now?
I mean, yeah, they've always... they have a very high consistency for doing September Directs. So, it's good that one happened. And I think we are generally very big fans of Directs. I think that they obviously vary in strength. And that just kind of depends on time of year, what they've got ready to show, whatever. But I think it's good that they're back. And I thought this was a decent Direct. There's definitely impactful moments, we might say.
Yes, you might say that.
But for September, when they've already got a strong lineup coming out later this year, and they only mentioned a few things from that strong lineup, I think, it's Nintendo are firing, not maybe on full cylinders, but they're a lot better than they have been maybe even the last couple of years, I'd say right now.
Yeah, definitely. There's exciting stuff all over the shop, potentially, and the fact that they've brought certain things back that have been absent. The fact that Bayonetta 3 was announced 4 years ago almost, and only now are we seeing it, but it is coming out next year. That's cool, right? And it's great to get some of these announcements and some release dates and stuff like that. So yeah, from my pitch on this one is this is one of the weirdest Nintendo Directs I've ever seen. Just some of the announcements are just out there in a way that I was like, what? Okay, that's strange. I didn't expect that, but that's happening. I guess
that reminder that Nintendo's a really, really weird company, and we need that reminder every now and then. We definitely got it with this Direct.
Yeah, for sure. And in the time now where we live, where we no longer have Satoru Shibata dressing up as Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright, I would love that injection back into the company, but they just seem to doing that through their announcements instead of weird side skits that they made with Reggie and Bill Trinan and Yokai Watch like they did back in the day. But yeah, it was pretty good, and we're going to just pick out some announcements and go through some of our favourite stuff that was shown. Bally, where do you want to start with this Direct? What is the thing?
Do you want the most impactful announcement first, or do you want the game I'm the most hyped for?
Let's start with a game. Let's start with game. Let's go with that, yeah.
I can't believe I'm saying this. Okay, maybe Triangle Strategy aside, I'm most hyped for Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
Yes, absolutely.
This is the one thing that was spoiled for me before. It's my own fault. I was on Twitter in the build up to the Direct, and I just saw a screenshot of Kirby with the Last of Us style buildings in the background. That's all I saw. I didn't see a title, and I just assumed, all right, damn it, we've got another Kirby game coming. I assumed it was obviously 2D. Wasn't excited at all. They do the build up for this new Kirby game. Oh, here comes the Kirby game, and then the trailer starts, and I'm like, oh crap, it's 3D, and it looks amazing, and this is awesome. And I even asked you in the chat, is this potentially even the Odyssey team? And it's not the Odyssey team, but
I mean, given that we know of, from my perspective, I think the game looks really cool. I don't think it's up to the quality standards of a Mario Odyssey, for example. So I don't think it is that team. But yeah.
No. But I think it's very refreshing to see Kirby in 3D, where he's not really been in 3D before, other than Kirby's Air Ride, and then Kirby in the Crystal Shards is kind of 2.5D. But this is full on 3D Kirby, kind of open area kind of style levels that I think who thought that The Last of Us in cartoon would look great, and it really does. So I think it just looks really cool. That's coming spring 22. It's not,
it is,
not
yeah.
far at all. Q1 is getting stacked by
really
the second. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think I saw enough mechanically from boss fights, abilities, platforming that I think this is a solid 7, 8 out of 10 kind of game.
Right,
that I'm looking
for
forward
sure.
to playing for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's the most I've ever been excited for a Kirby game in my life. I think is pretty solid there. Maybe not. Maybe Rainbow Paintbrush I was more excited for just because we
were pretty pumped for Rainbow Paintbrush.
Yeah, because of Canvas Curse. But this is, it just feels like finally they're like kind of doing something different with Kirby, and it might not actually be that different from a 2D game, given that it's still like you still get power-ups from enemies and you use those power-ups to kill other enemies and solve puzzles.
Still has to appeal to a Kirby audience who we assume is like on the younger end, wants an easier kind of game, and they're probably still going to skew towards that. So.
But I love this, like, this happy-go-lucky character, and he's just in a post-apocalypse, and it's like such a weird it is obviously like a bright and colourful post-apocalypse, but when this trailer started, I was like, oh, is this Splatoon? Because that's the vibe we've been getting from Splatoon 3, and it's like, oh, it's run down, and it's kind of chaos, because Chaos won in the last Splatfest, and they kind of talk about that with Splatoon 3, and we'll get there, but yeah, that was my thought, because I'd heard that stuff had leaked, and I didn't see anything, fortunately, so when it did get revealed it was Kirby, I was like, oh, cool, Kirby. And yeah, running around. I think it's the moment where he jumps on there's the escalator going up, and he just jumps on the middle and just runs up the middle. And I'm like, all right, you can kind of like go anywhere and jump on all these objects, and it feels like a fun adventure that I am ready to go on and see what's happening. And I made a joke actually that this is what happened. This is the alternate ending to the Smash Brothers apocalypse, where every character died except for Kirby, and he's just like going through a world on his own now. Everyone else is dead, and he never saved them in the Smash Brothers single player mode for Ultimate. And yeah, I think I'm interested to see if there's any like narrative reason for this. Probably very light storytelling wise, as tends to be the case with Nintendo platformers, but it's just weird. It's just not what you would expect from a new Kirby game. I think we've all just been trained to expect, like, all right, it's another Kirby game, it's just the same thing, and maybe there's a robot this time, or maybe it's a fighting game for some fucking reason, or it's a free-to-play experiment, or just, like, something bizarre. Because the Nintendo do experiment with Kirby. I just think, from our perspective, they experiment in the wrong way, in ways that are just not interesting to us. And I think this is finally one of those where it's like, oh, there we go. That's a weird Kirby experiment that I'm here for. Yeah. So
I mean, I do think the first Kirby game on Switch, whose name I cannot remember for the life of me.
Star Allies.
Star Allies. What a rememberable name. But I think that game looked very, very bland. Like, really not great.
Absolutely, and I don't think it reviewed super well either. It felt like, coming off the back of something like Robobot, which people really liked and felt like it kind of shook things up a bit, it felt like, okay, we're back to a regular 2D platformer with Kirby, and not much interesting.
I still think it sold perfectly well, and obviously Switch
of course.
And everything, and Kirby, I think, sells well. I think it's a low... It sounds harsh, because video games are hard to develop, but like it's a low effort, high reward kind of franchise for them, right?
Yeah.
That kind of game.
I know what you mean. It is just Nintendo's, like, there will never be a year when there isn't some kind of Kirby something, right? Because he's bankable.
Yeah. And then we rotate back into Yoshi, and then back into Kirby, and then Yoshi again. And it's like Yoshi, Kirby. Give me DK, give me Wario, please. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah. But cuteness sells, man. That's what people love. Kids love it. Cute. Adults love it.
This game looks
Kirby's
good.
Adorable.
It's great.
I think one of the fun moments was the sand like clinging to his body as he like gets up from that sandy beach. It's like, what? We're just going like super HD Kirby now. He's got like sand particles and grains, and no, I'm excited for that. And it looks like some big boss fights. That big gorilla was chucking stuff around, which is fun. So I'm excited about that. I am going to pick out, well, should we talk about it? Should we just get to the thing that everyone's talking about?
Because it's the most... in the room.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. So Miyamoto comes on, and I'm like, oh yeah, Miyamoto. I'm sure he's like working on some fun new game or something, right? Maybe he's bringing back Mole Mania or something crazy.
Star Fox Zero is ported to the Switch. No,
I think I did say, time for Star Fox. Right. That's the thing that Miyamoto is so associated with these days, and bringing that franchise back and constantly failing to do so to everyone's satisfaction. So he comes on, and it seemed like they had a screen or like a a comped-in fake screen for COVID reasons between Koizumi and Miyamoto, which just wasn't necessary, but they put it in there anyway.
Yes.
And then Miyamoto's like, hey, I've got some music. I've got some news about the Mario movie. And he's like, it's coming out next year, 2022. I was like, okay, cool. Sure, I'll watch that when it comes out. And he's like, but I'm not done yet. How about I tell you the people who are going to be playing the characters in this movie?
The
and I'm
pause
like,
between how about I tell you the character who the cast is going straight into the first cast member was like such a short amount of time that people just weren't ready for it.
No, it was just like, okay, and it's Chris Pratt as Mario, and I'm like, what the fuck? What a universe do I live in? What the hell is going on here? Not only did I not expect Mario to talk in this movie and be more, but because it's Illumination, right? And Illumination have done Minions movies and stuff like that where they do silent comedy essentially, because those Minions don't actually talk, they just do weird noises. So I was thinking along the lines of like, Mario has never spoken in his life really. Like, he says lines and Charles Martinet voices him, but it's always like quips of like, it's a me, and all these like tiny little pieces of dialogue, nothing that is an extended sentence or like even like a conversation with someone else. So the very idea that Mario is not only going to be silent, but is also going to be played by like this A-list Hollywood actor, but also I have no idea what he's going to do with the voice of the character. Is he going to do a bad Italian accent? Like, is that what's going to go on here? There are just so many questions I have when it comes to this movie. And yeah, it just continued from there. It's just like Anya Taylor-Joy is playing Princess Peach. And then we've got Jack Black as Bowser. I don't know who Charlie Day is. A lot of people seem to know who he is. I think he's from It's Only Sunny.
Yeah, I was unaware of that one as well.
Yeah, It's Only Sunny in Philadelphia, I think is the show he's in, which I've never seen, so I'm not really familiar with him, but people seem...
Seth Rogen as DK.
Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. Like, it just continued this assault of just people, well-known, famous actors as these Mario characters, and I don't know, man. This movie feels like it's going to be some kind of fever dream. I have no idea what to expect now, given that this is what they're doing with it. Will we be here looking at the old Super Mario Brothers movie and thinking that that's going to be on a par with this? I don't know.
Where are we going to be in 20 years from this film? Like, that's the question.
Yeah.
My biggest concern is it Illuminations, right?
Yeah, so they did Despicable Me and stuff like that. And what tends to be the case, or what I've heard people say, is that they skimp on animation quality because they pay a lot of money for like talent, and that's clearly being the case here as well.
Did they also do the Lego film, or is that someone else?
No, I don't think they do the Lego stuff, no. Yeah.
My concern is that Illuminations have a very different goal from Nintendo. So what I mean is, can Illuminations make a funny animated film with some big voice actors and have a successful film in terms of sales? Yes, they've proven they can do that. I've seen some of those films. They're funny enough, whatever, fine. I think they're an animation studio. They know how to make a funny animated film. Yeah. Fine. Nintendo's goal in the movie industry is slightly different. Like, is Nintendo's goal,
of course, yeah,
to make a funny animated film, or is it to make a film that represents its characters in film form, but still create a successful, entertaining film? And that's where I'm really worried that just stereotypes around Nintendo. When you think about Nintendo, a lot of these big decisions, like making a film, making a theme park, they're made by very old Japanese men in Japanese boardrooms. Do I have faith that old men in Japanese boardrooms know much about like Western film and, Hollywood and Illuminations and animated films like Minions, etc.? And that's where my faith is just like shot, because I'm just like, if Nintendo came out guns a-blazing saying English speaking like employees at Nintendo and Nintendo of America are taking a lead on our relationship with Illuminations, and that might be the case, and I need to do more reading into it, but my impression is that it seems like it's very high level NCL having a role with Illuminations, and I'm just not sure how that relationship is ever going to come out with a film that everyone comes around and says, actually, that's really great. Characters like Sonic already had a voice, and to be fair to Sonic, Sega is also a Japanese company, but I just think Sonic already had a voice, and Mario, while he has a voice, has never said anything more than "Mamma Mia," "Let's Go," etc. And that's where I just think that we're gonna meet a real brick wall when it comes to, the second Mario says anything that's not "Mamma Mia, Let's Go," that isn't Charles Martinet. I think anyone who knows Mario, all Nintendo fans who will be watching this film will just completely switch off. And that's not to say
it will feel weird, right?
And that's not to say, like I said, Illuminations are still going to make a very entertaining kids film, family film. But like, is this going to be a good representation of Mario? Like, it just feels like the question's already answered, really. I don't know.
Yeah, well, so a few points. I think they're Illumination, singular, not plural.
Okay.
I believe that's the case. But also, so I think what is happening here, and this very much feels like Miyamoto, of course, has been, he's the guy who invented Mario. He's been making these video games for years and years, but it seems like he is currently the figurehead, or like the person leading the charge on these other initiatives, which includes the theme park and includes this. And I think he is working very closely with them in order to make this happen, right? And I wouldn't say a lot of the creative decisions that are being made are being done by the Nintendo executives. I feel like Miyamoto is the one leading the charge on that and is working closely with the director and the people making the movie in terms of like sticking to the Nintendo brand Bible, as it were. Like what is the Mario brand Bible? How do they want their characters to be represented?
Yeah. It's just how the hell do you apply that to a film where he's voiced by Chris Pratt?
And I think that's where they have to let go of some of their kind of almost stringent adherence to like this. You can only have Toad characters in Paper Mario now, as Miyamoto decrees. Like, I think internally they can do that because they can make their own decisions about their own products, but when they come to working with outside entities and theme parks as well as movies, I think they probably have to be a little bit more flexible. And even Miyamoto saying, okay, Chris Pratt, he's going to say a lot. Mario's going to be saying a lot of lines in this movie, and also, for some reason, Chris Pratt is cool, according to Miyamoto. He seems to like him, which is an interesting thing. And I think he has come to an understanding that, like, this will have to deviate in some ways, but it definitely feels like they have a much deeper involvement with this as a movie than Sega did with Sonic as a movie. It's especially when you think about the controversy that happened before that Sonic movie was made and the version of Sonic that the studio had created that was just...
They're just very protective of their characters more generally than Sega.
And Sega really are not, especially with Sonic.
Sega, like in a whole...
I don't think Nintendo would ever have let an abomination like that happen to Mario. I just don't see it ever happening. But
also the Sonic film turned out good.
It did in the end, yes, right? But like that was after they U-turned on the design of Sonic himself, and I'm sure the movie was like good to begin with in terms of writing and stuff like that. I've not seen the Sonic movie yet. I probably should at some point. It seems like it's good fun, but yeah, I do think that with Nintendo they definitely have a tighter stranglehold on their franchises and what you can do with them and all this type of stuff, right? But I think they have to let go. I think just in order to get this movie...
My prediction is it's going to be a fun family film that does really well, but Nintendo fans are going to be like, this just doesn't sit right with me. And that might be what Nintendo wanted. That might be the aim here, you know?
Look, the end of the day, a lot of these projects, and I think a lot of them really started life and decisions were made about them prior to the Switch, just because given the situation with the Wii U and 3DS, they were not good financially, right? They didn't have a guaranteed success in the console space. And so hedging their bet at that time, they went into mobile. They started making decisions about, okay, we're going to start branching our IP out into different places, and that included doing the theme park and making this movie and potentially doing Netflix adaptations of some of their properties, because it's a solid revenue stream, but also it allows a wider mass audience to get indoctrinated into Nintendo properties and IPs, and therefore potentially in the future think, oh, I enjoyed that Mario movie, Mom, can you buy me a Nintendo Switch, right? Like, that's kind of their approach. I think nowadays is much more as supplementary. I think back when the Wii U was doing bad, they were probably thinking of it as a more financial incentive, but I think at the moment, because they are much more financially stable thanks to the success of the Switch, it feels more like a way to even further widen their kind of hold on people and try and do a Marvel-esque thing or a Disney-esque thing and be like become part of the culture more so. And you do that by going to mediums that are deeper parts of the culture. As much as we would love video games to be more widely accepted and played and stuff like that, and we're getting there, still movies and TV are much more widely accepted cultural forces, and so I think that makes sense in terms of their goals and what they want to do with it. But yeah, I'm interested.
I'm just think we're gonna like the film.
No, well, look, I don't give a shit if there's a Zelda Netflix show or if there's a Mario movie. The reason I like those properties is because they are video games. I could not care less if you gave me a adaptation of a video game thing in another form. Like I treat those mediums on their own merits, regardless of like what the thing is.
Or would you say the same about the Nintendo theme park?
Yeah, I mean that's slightly different, I think, because it is theme parks are a lot of theme parks as well. They play on certain elements of your nostalgia, like especially with the Disney stuff, and even like superhero stuff, like going and doing that Spider-Man ride at Universal. Like a lot of that stuff is tied in with brands already, so there's already an inherent tie to that stuff. So theme parks,
in the same way as these films, like there's a link
in a way, but I think like a film as a cultural object is different to a theme park as a experience. I don't know. I look at them as two separate entities, and I'm not as. I think the idea of a theme park with Nintendo stuff is cooler from a kind of fan perspective, because it's not necessarily about delivering you something that obviously people can have opinions of like what's good about a theme park and what's not, but I think most people just go there and they're like, oh, that's the thing I like, and it's fun to like exist in a world of this universe that I love, right? Whereas I don't know, it's hard to separate, but I do think they're different to me personally. But yeah, I think they're both trying to achieve the same ends for Nintendo, which is get more people interested,
awareness,
in
make
our stuff.
Money.
Awareness.
Yeah.
It's all that at the end of the day. And whether this is successful or not, I don't really care.
Chris Pratt helps in that goal rather than hinders.
And of course, this is what gets people into theaters. That is sad as it is. Like you have to have big names in order to do that, and the name Mario is not. It's a wide known universal thing. Same with Sonic, but I think it just helps. It helps get like a mum who does not want to go to see a fucking Mario movie, right? She just doesn't want to take her kid to see it, but she's being told she's going to see it. If she sees Chris Pratt's in it, she might be like, oh, okay, I know him. I've seen those movies he's in. This is something for me. Like, it's for the adults to get into the cinemas as well as the kids. So, yes. Anyway.
That surprises me that a parent would be into watching a family film that's more geared towards kids for the simple reason that a voice actor was in it, rather than being like...
It's star power, isn't it?
Right, but rather than being like, oh, this is a Pixar film, I know there will be jokes in there for an adult audience as well as the family, like that. It feels
totally
weird to me that someone would be like, yes, Chris Pratt's in it, we're going to go see the Mario film. Like that just boggles my mind.
I think that's
like that.
With Pixar though, like Pixar are able to do that because they are a name, versus Illumination, which is like... are people really fans of Illumination? I don't know. Probably not. Exactly. And so like they get round it by being like, hey, we threw a bunch of money at extremely famous people, and lots of them, and you know them all, and because you know them and like them, you're going to go watch this, right? So
yeah. And that's ultimately how the first big celebrity actor in animation sold tickets was for Aladdin with Robin Williams way back in like 92, 93, right? So
yeah. So
it works.
Anyway, fucking bizarre. Just like,
was this the right time and place to announce it? Is the
I
other
don't
question.
know.
Like, why was it part of this and maybe not separate? Like,
I am honestly stunned that they chose a Nintendo Direct to do this. I think from a marketing perspective, it's actually fucking genius, because the core audience who watch Nintendo Direct is not massive, but it is sizable enough to where everyone is talking about it at the same time, which means that when you drop that fucking bomb, everyone is tweeting simultaneously Chris Pratt Mario.
Nintendo saw that Idris Elba bomb and thought, we want some of that. We want some of that cake.
And you make more waves doing it this way because you get the core people who know what's going on, but because the core people are talking about it so much on social media, it explodes to the rest of social media.
I have multiple Twitter accounts. One's much more for like British politics, and it's clear when stuff really penetrates through because you see people on the British politics one tweeting about Chris Pratt as Mario and like, yep, job done, it worked, it penetrated the audience.
Of course, my dad messaged me yesterday on WhatsApp and he sent me an article from the BBC about it, being like, look at this, and I was like, well, that if my dad is messaging me that's what tells you it's broken through, right? So yeah. Anyway, let's get back to video games. That was fun talking about movies and stuff, but really, it's a Nintendo Direct. Let's talk about video games. Bally, tell me another video game you're excited about from this thing.
I am excited for Metroid Dread, and I'm so excited. I closed my eyes for the whole thing.
The whole time. Yeah, man. What is it with Nintendo with this game? They just, for some reason, they want to show everything possible about it to us, and it's admirable. But
you say that, are you not still convinced? So I've not seen the trailers. I avoided them, and you've said, Bally, you should probably avoid these.
I told you to. Yeah.
Yeah. Surely there is still a lot that they have kept hidden that will be at the latter part of this game.
Of course,
surely.
Yes.
Right.
And I really hope that is the case. Yes, I'm sure that is, and I'm sure that they're only really scratching the surface. Nevertheless, they're showing a lot of stuff, and I get it, right? Because I think from their perspective, Metroid has never been a franchise that has sold well. It's always been a critical darling, and people who love it fucking love it, but it just has not become a big success. Like, frankly, Hollow Knight has probably sold better than any Metroid game, and that's a little startling, given that, you know, Metroid is the granddaddy of the entire genre that like most indie games are these days, right? Like, it is. I think Metroid's influence is just so outsized compared to how well the series itself does.
It's insane. Super Metroid, when it came out, supposedly sold like less than like 1 million copies or 1.5 or something, which was like really low. And the impression, well, statistically, like apparently it's just never sold in Japan. And I think the second you're a Nintendo franchise that never sells in Japan, it's a rocky road going forward, because like they always like to back up their franchises that do really well in Japan. They're the ones that are most likely to get the sequels, get the next game, etc. And Metroid just never has, you know, worked in that market in the same way.
No, it hasn't broken through, and I think this, frankly, is the best chance it has, and I think that's why Nintendo are pushing it so hard, because there's a lot of factors going on here. Number one is the Nintendo Switch is wildly successful, and any new game in a franchise on Switch will become the best-selling version of that game, regardless of its quality, regardless of anything else. It just will happen because of quantity and volume and attention that Nintendo commands these days. Number two is the indie scene has just blown up with this genre, and there are many high-profile successes that have sold incredibly well. Hollow Knight, Ori, Axiom Verge, like all these games have really revitalized this genre and made it a mainstream like thing that more people pay attention to, and so it has more popularity, right? And so these factors coming together alongside this brand new game that is continuing the story, that is the next canonical entry, it's no longer a remake, which gets new people and old people excited. It feels like the perfect storm for them to strike hot and really get Metroid to do something this time. And I think because of those factors, they are pushing it as hard as they possibly can, because they will see benefit from it, right? This will be the best-selling Metroid game. I can pretty much guarantee that's going to be the case. And I hope it is as well. Like, I just hope it gets more recognition, because then it means that they might make another one, right? And it goes back to that question we always talk about of like, why do we care so much about, you know, people buying enough copies? And this is why, is because like Nintendo pays attention to that stuff, and then we don't go another 10 years of silence waiting for the next Metroid game. So yeah, that's kind of the confluence of factors I think are at play here, and I'm just excited. It's a couple of weeks, man. It's coming. I want to play it, and I will play it very much so. So, yes, I also closed my eyes throughout the entire thing, despite the fact I was streaming a reaction to it, and that's kind of antithetical to the whole idea.
Poor content.
Really bad. But yes, looks great. I have to talk about Bayonetta 3. I think that is, for me, probably the standout of this Direct that isn't Kirby, is Bayonetta 3. We've been waiting for it for so long. And multiple trolls in that trailer. Multiple trolls. First of all, they have a Wonder 101, which is the Shibuya 101 building. And so I was like, wait, is this a Wonderful 101 thing? But that was just a reference. Then you see the Platinum thing on the building. Then some aliens come along that kind of look like Astral Chain aliens. And then fucking Lappy is there, the dog from Astral Chain, the mascot dog, and I'm like, oh, it's Astral Chain 2, it's not Bayonetta 3, and then fucking Witch Time activates, and you see the reflection of Bayonetta coming down and just, like, destroying this beast, and then the pan up and the new hairstyle, my goodness, looks so good, especially when they start to play gameplay and it's clearly running at 60, very smooth. Obviously it kind of gets a bit chunky later on when she's fucking riding a dragon down buildings and they're all collapsing. That's the point where I'm like, well, let's get a Switch Pro in here for this, please. But you know what, Bayonetta 2, I've talked about it before, it is the fastest I have gone to don't care about anything to do with this, because I was like, oh, Bayonetta, that's a thing, I don't really care about it. I played the demo, literally instantly went to Amazon and pre-ordered the game. I've never been so quickly converted to a franchise in my life, and Bayonetta 2 was my game of the year the year it came out. Stunning game, just incredible action, and it's the game that really got me into this character action genre that I hadn't really been that interested in before, because like I'm not really into beat 'em ups or side-scrolling beat 'em ups and that kind of thing, and I don't really care about like combos in fighting games, and that feels like what character action games are, and that is true to some degree. But the other thing about character action games is that they are bonkers and just full of spectacle, and nothing embodies that more than the Bayonetta games. There are moments in Bayonetta 2 that are just wild, ridiculous shit, and I just get so much entertainment value off watching it and enjoying it and just playing those games. Because even as someone who's not amazing at it, it just gives you this feeling of empowerment that is unlike anything else in video games. And it's one of those things, like, off the back of this, I got into the Devil May Cry series. I played the first of those games, and then I played DMC5 when it came out, played Astral Chain, really enjoyed Astral Chain, and so yeah, Bayonetta is really responsible for me getting into a genre that I previously had kind of written off and wasn't super interested in checking out. So the fact that we finally have footage and a release date of or at least year of 2022 for Bayonetta 3 is really exciting, and I just want to play it. I really want to play it because it just reminded me how good Bayonetta 2 was. Just seeing the combat and the way she moves, it's just like the swiftness and the speed and the slowing down time, and it feels, pressing buttons in video games has never felt as good as it does in Bayonetta. It's really remarkable. So Bally, I know you have not been as interested. You're probably similar to like what I was before I got into Bayonetta.
I am. I owe it to myself to give it another go, either with 2 or 1, or just jump in and try it again, because I did try the demo. It wasn't that hot on it. I'm not into character action much at all, really, but I should probably give it a go at some point.
I think you should, Bayonetta 1 and 2 are both on Switch, and I need to play the first game because I haven't actually played that. I would love to get that. And
do a backlog club, Bayonetta 1.
Yeah, I think Bayonetta, that's, potential. That is definitely a potential thing we could do, but I would love to play that, and obviously do a replay of 2 before 3 comes out. Yeah, that would be great. So, super excited for Bayonetta 3. It's such a weird... It's the most not Nintendo franchise, and yet now it is a Nintendo franchise. It's bizarre, man, how it's happened, right? Like, Nintendo saving that game, saving that franchise by funding it, and then Bayonetta coming into Smash, and then re-releasing those games on Switch, and now they're doing a third game. Like, Bayonetta is more associated with Nintendo now than it ever was with the previous gen consoles on 360 and PS3, which is wild considering where it came from and the kind of game it is. I will
say, like, it's interesting that distinction has happened, especially given the new extra power of Xbox and PlayStation. And I think fans will rightly be a little bit grumpy that, yes, when these big monsters do come out and it starts chunking up, and knowing that would run really well on either like a Series X or a PlayStation 5, that's a little frustrating, especially for like a third-person action game.
It's true, but we got to remember the franchise wouldn't exist if Nintendo didn't.
Totally.
So like that's the problem I think with those people, is like they're like, but it should be on mine. But it's like, it wouldn't exist at all, man. Like,
it's different wanting it on your console for loyalty reasons versus wanting it on your console because your console runs it better than the Nintendo console.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. And I totally get that. And the style of game it is, it pushes the boundaries, and it will really try to push Switch to its limit, I'm sure. So that makes sense. But, you know, Bayonetta 2 did a lot of bonkers stuff and managed to hold a solid frame rate pretty much the whole way through. So
it did, and I've not played that game, but this game does look like a level of bonkers above that.
Yeah, to some degree. You're controlling kaijus, right? That's what I got from the trailer. Is like there are these giant kaijus having fights, and I thought they were just having them in the background, and you were just doing stuff on the ground. But no, you are controlling the kaiju in the sky as well. Like that's it's crazy shit. I love it. I'm super excited for that. Bally, do you have another one you want to pick out here?
I'm looking forward to Splatoon 3.
Yes.
I hope it's not like an excited flash in the pan, we play it online for 2-3 weeks, and then it's like, I've done the single player, it's no improvement on the last game, the new modes are fine, but, you know, I'm judging from, like, some of those power-ups, it does look very cool. Like, I think you mentioned, like, it looks like they're going a little bit Overwatch in their kind of style of, like, power-ups and things with, like, the rolling ball, and one of the characters looked like they were, like, Spider-Man going through the level, like, hooking on with, like, ink. It just looked mad. So I'm really intrigued, like, if the game just looks a lot more three-dimensional than it perhaps did before, and that is pretty exciting, especially when you think back to how many of the weapons were so gun-based in the first game, apart from like the paintbrush and the roller, obviously, and just they're really evolving on that formula in a way that I hope is substantial enough to the point where it really does feel a lot more like Overwatch, which I have recently really taken to like. So yeah, I think it's interesting, and I really hope that the single player is something that we're both big fans of.
Yeah, I hope so. Just get rid of the life system. I think it's as simple as that.
That's certainly one huge part of it for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I do think there's some cool, like there's a shot of like upside down buildings, and like there's some bizarre stuff going on in that trailer. It looks really cool.
There's a level of like style and like Japanese indie scene kind of like, this is like a cultural moment here right now. Like this is a big deal, like what the styles they're going for with this game, that I think we will look back on and be like, wow, that's what Japan indie scene looked like in 2021 or something, you know? I don't know. It looks really cool, like a real interesting take.
Very out there.
Very out there.
And yeah, a lot of glitching stuff going on in the trailer. Yeah, it's hard to tell a lot of what's going on there, but I think from the perspective of the multiplayer, to shake it up, and you know, you mentioned Overwatch already, but I think that's one of my things I wanted out of a next Splatoon, is like maybe take some cues from Overwatch. And it seems like they literally did that, because fucking Wrecking Ball is now in this game, and you can roll around and like get out in this like crab tank and start shooting. And I was like,
is
that literally
that move from going from the ball to the sort of Gatling gun style tank is like just so Wrecking Ball. Like
it is the exact same thing, isn't it? It's ridiculous. Yeah, but then also like with the elastic arms, like it feels that they have more distinctive character stuff going on, aside from just the weapons themselves, like mobility stuff and things like that.
It's
right?
very much they've not put the brakes on and said that wouldn't work in the squid world. They just said, yeah, fuck it, like mechanically it'll be great, we got to do it kind of thing. And I like that attitude about Splatoon. It's like mechanics first, we need to get that right, make this gameplay evolve in some ways, rather than just worry about like its aesthetic, although they are doing very well on that front as well.
Yeah, I mean it looks great. You know, Splatoon's always looked really
no release date, but we think
nothing.
Was it 2022 before?
I think it was 22. They said, because so this was shown off in the February Direct for the first time, and they said 2022.
I'm not gonna pick this up in my Fantasy Critic. It's one of those games that I can just see sliding. So
potentially. I don't know. I think Splatoon is probably a safer bet, just because as a series it feels more iterative, and looking at what they have shown so far, it feels a bit more safe. Like I would imagine this is a summer game. This is like July or something, or August, right? Next year. I think that's definitely a possibility. But yes, it's always, you got to be safe with those picks, man, especially at the start of the year, because you know, could screw you up later down the line. I'm going to talk about Chocobo GP. They're doing Final Fantasy racing game and Chocobos on roller skates, and it's like Mario Kart.
Apparently, they did one on PS1 or something. Like it might be it's either a reboot or remake or something. Like it's not a.
We were chatting about on stream Konami Crazy Races, which this reminds me of in terms of another company, a Japanese company, doing their Mario Kart with all their far less well recognizable characters to most people, although a few people in there will be like, oh, that's Vivi, that's the White Mage, that's Gilgamesh or whatever from all Final Fantasy lore and all these other games that have happened. No one there's no Cloud in this game, right? Which would have been much more recognizable to a wide audience.
Right. Why wouldn't you put your big, your
I don't know. I think Chocobo Racing, it's the Chocobo. It's kind of focusing, I think, more on the generic characters, far more than the recognizable ones. Just make it a bit cuter and more, I don't know, open to an audience who doesn't necessarily...
You can't use your A-tier team on a bad game.
Yeah. I don't know.
That may be part of it.
It looks fine. It doesn't look very good. Kind of low budge a little bit. But I like the idea. The fact that they were like, anyway, we're going to do Fire, Fira, and Firaga. And I'm like, we're just taking the magic system in every game now. We're just going to do it in this racing game as well.
That's fun.
It was fun. It's a cool idea. And I'm sure it's going to be delightful for some people. But I don't know if I'll play it.
If it's a reasonable price and we can play online together, I'm so up for it. But I just know it'll be that extra bit pricey than you want it to be,
Of course. Square Enix tax. Always happens.
Bring it to Game Pass. That's a good platform for it.
Sure,
try on Game Pass.
Exactly. I think it's a Switch exclusive, actually, is what they said. Okay. It's only coming to Switch, and it's coming next year. But that seems fun. I hope it's good. It looks wild. Bally, what do you want to pick out next?
I'm very excited for Triangle Strategy. I know
which they've decided to just call Triangle Strategy now.
I had a couple of issues with the demo, mainly that I was just not mastering the tactics quite well enough, and I look forward to actually playing the main game and doing all the tutorials in the build up, and hopefully managing the strategy a bit better. But
it was challenging for sure. I relish that challenge because strategy is one of those rare genres where for me I do really like something that pushes back against me. But I definitely feel like a lot of people found it quite challenging, and that's why one of the points they brought up was, hey, we've got scalable difficulty, you can change it whenever you want. Fantastic. I love to see that. That's really, really great.
Because I do actually think that game just visually and narratively could be strong enough to a point where if it gets too much for me, I just drop the difficulty right down and I just kind of play through the final third of the game, perhaps.
Oh, totally. And I'm sure that'll be a lot of people, right? Yeah. And that's great. And I really appreciate that that's what they're doing. But the fact that Square Enix are you can't change them. You can try, but they're never going to change. And it's okay, this time we're going to do a project name that is so stupid, it just defies all stupidity that we're going to have to change it, right? But then I think they just come to this realization every time that everyone knows what it's called, and so if you suddenly change the name, then people are going to have a disassociation and be like, oh, what was that called? And it's kind of happened with Project Athia. So many people who watched that thing were like, wait, is this a new game? Have I seen this Forspoken? I don't know if I've heard that before. It does happen a lot in video games with project titles that then end up changing. And so Square Enix were well, everyone knows it might be a stupid fucking name, but everyone knows it now, so we're just going to stick with it. It's kind of
mad because video game development takes a very long time.
Yes.
However, I do not believe for a second that naming a game takes anywhere near as long, and you can probably get it sorted within, I don't know, a few weeks if you really put your minds to it,
Yes.
It's weird that, but when marketing is so important to the video game industry these days, and having that consistency between Nintendo Directs and other showcases that have the same name, it's surely so important to get that recognition that you want the same name, and changing it just confuses everyone.
This could be the big brain take, though, that it's so stupid that people talk about it more. It could be one of those things of it's so fucking dumb that people remember it and talk about it more because it's terrible. And maybe that has been Square Enix's strategy the whole time, is let's just be stupid, because then people will talk about our stupid.
I mean, with Octopath, the thing people talked about the most was the art style, and people already talking about that less because it's already less impactful the second time you do it. That's not to say it's still glorious and looks incredible.
Oh, for sure.
But I feel like that might be one other reason that we're talking about the name a little bit more than we were before.
Maybe,
but,
yeah. I do appreciate that the second outing was not just Octopath 2 and it's a totally different genre, like similar enough cool. RPG wise, but the fact that it is a tactics game as opposed to a turn-based RPG, I really appreciate that switch up. And I think maybe part of it is because they are releasing a remake of Dragon Quest 3 that will be a much more traditional RPG in this style. And so having a game that isn't, because then you have 3 games that are all turn-based RPGs in this style, and it's like, well, by that point, would people be bored of it to the point where the Dragon Quest 3 remake wouldn't be as interesting?
Like the demo showed, there are very clear Octopath elements in that strategy system, which are very cool, like the turn order.
Yeah, like the BP system and stuff like that.
Really
as well.
cool, really cool. They're taking some of the best aspects of the Octopath battle system and obviously the art style, and then just doing this whole new thing. It looks incredible.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. And that's coming March as well.
March, and Q1 again. So busy.
Yeah, Kirby and that, and also there was something else, I think. I can't remember.
From this direct.
Maybe. I'm thinking there's loads of games coming out around that period generally.
Yes, I mean, there's like Horizon and...
the Saints Row reboot is happening. I think Dying Light 2 as well.
Dying Light 2.
Loads
the big Dark Souls studio again?
That's coming in January. Elden Ring is happening in January.
Elden Ring. I mean, that's still Q1, right? So
Yeah. Lot of
goodness.
Never ends, Bally. We thought it would end at some point. It doesn't. What continues to happen, though, is Nintendo putting out stuff too late, and that is N64 and Genesis on Switch. I've been watching reactions and people being like, yes, Nintendo, N64, we love you. And I'm like, you people are insane. Well, Nintendo should have done this fucking years ago. It's just the most infuriating thing.
Here's my take, is that I think a lot of the people getting really excited about N64 and Genesis games didn't own either a Wii or a Wii U. Or they,
of course they didn't, because no one fucking owned a Wii U.
Well, true, but like they're not, like we're quite far down the line as very hardcore Nintendo fans who have played quite a lot of retro games in the last 10 years through Nintendo's virtual console, both on Wii and predominantly Wii U for us. But like, I just don't think people are like that, and they're just really ready for N64 for whatever reason. And
totally,
they'll find out a lot of those games just aren't that great.
I mean, some of them hold up. I think there's definitely like merit to certain N64 games.
All the best ones have been remade in some way, and that, but like Ocarina of Time, Star Fox.
It is a bit of a bummer to be like, here's the N64 version of Ocarina. The 3DS version is just better in every way, and it's just like and we don't have that version on Switch.
Very excited for people to play Mario Tennis on the N64 and realize, wow, this physics engine is like 10 times better than what they're doing with Mario Tennis in the last 15 years, damn it.
Yeah, totally. I was going to ask you about that, of like, you're probably going to dive back into that, I imagine. And it has online play now, so we could play that against each other, which is cool.
That,
I think that's the cool thing about this is... So let's break it down. So they're doing a quote-unquote expansion pack, not to be confused with the expansion pack without a C for N64. And it includes an additional cost, which we don't know yet, so they will charge more for the Nintendo Switch Online.
If they're not saying it up front, you know it's bad. It's going to be horrendous.
I hope not, but you're probably right. So, we're going to be charged more for their online service. In exchange, they are so graciously giving us N64 and Genesis games. And according to people, insiders, supposedly Game Boy stuff will be a part of this as well, but they just wanted to start with N64 and Genesis to kind of get people excited, and then they'll add Game Boy later as an addendum. But, yes, it's a separated like membership, and as with every Nintendo thing, it has to be named as the most asinine way possible, which is Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack, which is the name of this total package together. And for that, you will be able to play a bunch of N64 games, most of the ones you would expect. A lot of Mario, of course, Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Mario Tennis, and Dr. Mario is in there, I think, as well. But you also have Sin and Punishment, which is great because I've been meaning to play that for ages, and I did buy it on my Wii U a little while ago now, but playing on Switch would probably be a lot better, so that kind of sucks.
That's a rare game, right? That's also on Rare Replay.
No, it's not. Sin and Punishment is Treasure. Treasure make Sin
What's
and
the
Punishment.
first-person shooter before GoldenEye?
Perfect Dark.
Perfect Dark, of course.
Yes, that was after GoldenEye. In fact, was Perfect Dark. But yes, the Perfect Dark is not listed here. I don't believe because
we could also get Sin and Punishment on our Wii U if you wanted.
That's why I said I bought it already. Yeah.
Oh, you've already bought it.
I bought it when it was. I got some gold point, or I think silver point discount on my Nintendo, which is why I bought Sin and Punishment, because we were planning maybe to put it in a poll for Backlog Club at one point, and I never have played it yet because I'm kind of waiting for that point. But now the fact that Sin and Punishment is available or gonna be available through this, I'll probably just play on Switch and that. Okay. £6 wasted, but it's fine. I own it in perpetuity, and that isn't the case with these because they might disappear at some point. But anyway, Winback is another one I've not really heard of, but looked interesting. That's the kind of shit I'm here for. It's great that Mario 64 is there. I literally just played it. It's also bizarre that they have a remastered version of Mario 64, but they're also putting Mario 64 on this, and is there going to be a difference? Will you be able to tell a difference? I don't know. It's a little weird. And yeah, I think I'm actually much more interested in the Genesis stuff because it's a platform that I've never owned. I haven't played a lot of that back catalogue. You got stuff like Phantasy Star and Shining Force, which are classic RPGs and strategy games. You got Gunstar Heroes, which I really wanted to play. Golden Axe, so many revered and talked about Genesis games that for me, I probably wouldn't be as interested in paying for this membership if it was just N64, but with Genesis in there, I'm like, yeah, actually, I will do this, because those are the types of games I just wouldn't buy of my own volition, but given the richness of that catalogue and the way people talk about it, I'm far more interested in diving into some Genesis stuff, so definitely will be checking that out and playing some of those games, but they did show some upcoming stuff as well, so stuff is going to come out on N64, which included, and I think this is the interesting one, Banjo-Kazooie, which I think does open the door, as you mentioned, with Perfect Dark, for that possibly being the case.
Diddy Kong Racing.
Diddy Kong Racing.
Which, as Blessing has said on Kind of Funny Games, is unique because it now has Nintendo and Microsoft characters in it. And the only other game that does that is Super Smash Brothers. So, we're now in a position where you could actually see Diddy Kong Racing, which obviously has Diddy and Banjo, etc. in it. So.
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah, and they did remake Diddy Kong Racing on DS. That was one of those rare Microsoft already owned things that did come back post the acquisition of Rare. But
are there any Microsoft published games on DS? Well, that was only Game Boy Advance, wasn't it?
I think there was going to be a Halo game on DS at one point that was cancelled. I remember, I think Nintendo World Report talked about that in one of their telethon live streams, where they revealed the story of there was a time where Microsoft were going to ship a Halo game on a Nintendo handheld, but never materialized, never ended up happening. I just thinking about how ridiculous Rare's output was on the Nintendo 64. We have Banjo-Kazooie 1 and 2, DK64, Conker's Bad Fur Day, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Diddy Kong Racing. That's 7 fucking games. How long was the N64 around for? They were shipping they must have been shipping multiple games per year. It's actually ridiculous when you think about the output that Rare had on N64. Isn't Gemini, what's it called? Jet Force Gemini?
Jet Force Gemini, that's another one.
As well?
Yeah.
Jesus
That's a big
Christ.
game as well. That was a big deal.
It's absurd. When people talk about Rare's influence on that era of Nintendo, it is so large. And to think that Dinosaur Planet could have also potentially been a game before it was saved for GameCube, just unbelievable.
To think that they've been working on Everwild for 4 years.
Yeah, I know.
And he's gonna get the director left or whatever, didn't they? Or being restarted.
No idea what's going on with that. But yeah, Rare on N64 were a gem. And the idea that we could potentially get a bunch of their games on this service is actually much more exciting, I think, for a lot of people. And yeah, here's the thing. Here's the brutal reality of this. Everyone's going to get excited and play these games, and then what's going to happen? Nintendo is going to go dry. The well is going to go dry, and
you're still going to be paying that subscription
we're still going to be paying more, and 6 months are going to go by, and they're going to be like,
here's 5 Game Boy games.
Yep, and here's some Game Boy, and now here's one more N64 game. Another 6 months go by, and they're like, and we've added Pokemon Stadium 2 for some random reason, and you can't connect anything to it, but it's here, and it's like, That is going to happen, and we just need to...
And you know that when the second Switch comes out, they're going to wipe the whole slate completely clean.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Completely. And you don't have any ownership of those games, and that's where it's like... That's where I think the subscription service for Game Pass is a lot more transparent and impressive and better value than this shit that Nintendo keep pulling. It just does my head in.
Yeah, it's bad, and they'll continue to be bad at it, and they will not change because enough people will pay them money. And we will as well. So that's kind of the way it goes. Although I feel like we have an excuse because we talk about it. So I think, maybe I wouldn't be hopping on this bonus thing if not.
Are you definitely going to do it, or it just depends on that price? And
oh yeah, I'm definitely going to do it. I'm definitely, of course, because I want to play the Genesis games, and I think that's a fun way to do it. And there will be, like, what if Ogre Battle 64 gets on there? I want to check that out, right? Like, I want to see what if they put Quest 64 on there. There's some. What about Glover, man? Right? Like, there's some weird shit on N64 that I would love to dig into, but would not pay for of my own volition.
Weird shit, yes. Quality, I'm less certain, but
yeah, no, of course, right? Like all the good games will have been there already, but I want to dig in. So cool. Is there anything else major you want to talk about, Bally? From this, there are some smaller things we can go over. Yeah,
nothing major. You can definitely run through it. I think it's interesting. They've got a save the date on 2 announcements with the Smash Brothers and Animal Crossing. That's quite. It's like just I don't know. It just feels weird when you have a direct and say, following like this.
There were 2 Nintendo Direct style things announced within this one Nintendo Direct, right?
Yeah, and they have done that before, to be fair to them, but it just does feel a bit weird, especially with the Animal Crossing one. They're obviously like revealing Brewster's Cafe and all this, and it's like,
yeah,
maybe I'm underselling it, but it's just a damn coffee cafe. Like, can we just see it? Like, I'm sure they've made it look nice, and it's going to be cool, and there might be a couple of extra features.
The thing that was cool about Brewster's Coffee Shop back in the day was that that's where KK performed, but now KK just performs in the square. So, like, what are you going to do?
They could move him there. They could move him there. You can like choose. Maybe he performs in the square in the summer, but he performs in the cafe in the winter or something.
Yeah, and I guess you do get like some fun dialogue just having a tea or coffee at Brewster's and just sitting there and he chats to you about life or whatever. That's fun, and that's kind of what Animal Crossing is. Like, it's very light in that way.
I feel like it's a hard sell in the direct to be like, coffee shop. I don't know. It just
you don't know. I feel like Animal Crossing fans, that's what they want, though, right? Like, that's the.
Also, how many people have dropped off Animal Crossing by this point?
Oh, loads. Yeah, of course. But like, how many? I think it's a little bit of an unfair thing to say. Like, of course, Animal Crossing is a game you're supposed to play forever, but like, how many people drop off all games all the time? I think the fact that I put 140 hours. There are so many people out there who are like, man, I only put 600 hours into Animal Crossing and I don't have anything else to do. And it's like, you put 600 fucking hours into a game. That's more than like 90% of games you probably play. I totally get it from a perspective of someone who like just focuses on that entire experience and that's the thing they play. But like, I do find it a little rich for people to be like, man, I put 150 hours into this game and I'm already done with it. And I'm like, dude, like, I never put that amount of time into any game.
Yeah, when I said dropped off, I meant people like me who have played like 30, 40, 50 and then dropped off. I didn't mean like the people who were like hundreds and then dropped off.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. But I don't know. Maybe I'll jump back in. I do love that Animal Crossing, and I had a great time with it. So, let's talk about some collections and some revivals. They're bringing the Shadowrun trilogy to Switch, which is really cool. I played Shadowrun Dragonfall a few years ago. I kind of posted on Reset Era and was like, hey, what's a good entry point to CRPGs? Because I was interested in Pillars of Eternity, Divinity. I was like, what is a good entry point? And people were like, Shadowrun, check out Dragonfall. It's like kind of fantasy themed, but also it's like cyberpunk with fancy races. So there's like orcs and stuff, but they all have like sniper rifles. It's a really cool mashup, cool world. And it's got like XCOM style combat, but also a lot of dialogue choices and narrative focus. It's a really cool series, and it's cool that trilogy is coming to Switch because it feels good for handheld. Castlevania Advance Collection, which has been rumored for ages and ages. It got rated this week, and so people were pretty inevitable about it being released on the same day as the Direct, and that was the case, and it's out now. You can go check it out and buy it. If you have not played those games, I highly recommend them if you like Castlevania-style games, if you're excited about Metroidvanias generally. Really solid entries. All 3 of them are good. I would say Circle of the Moon's probably the weakest in terms of how well it's aged, because you have to double tap the D-pad to run, and I don't have confirmation of them changing that, which they really should have changed it, because it's one of the most annoying things. But I played through all 3 of these on Wii U Virtual Console and talked about all of them on the show, so if you do want to hear some thoughts, find the backlog and dig in and see where I talked about them. There'll be episodes where I did. But yeah, they also are including Dracula X on this collection, which is like the bad version of Rondo of Blood, and it's a bit weird that they would put that on here. It feels like kind of a bonus throw-on that they added, because it wasn't... I don't believe Dracula X was on GBA, but it's just... I think it was on PSP maybe, and that's why it kind of counts as a handheld-style Castlevania as well. But really, you should be playing Rondo of Blood, the original, that is included in... There was a Symphony of the Night and Rondo of Blood pack that only came to PlayStation. One of the most bizarre things, man... There still is no way to play Symphony of the Night on Nintendo. I just don't understand it. What is going on? It's wild. Like, it would do really well. I don't know why they have not put that collection of Symphony of the Night and Rondo onto Switch. It blows my mind, but at the very least, you're getting the Advanced Collection, and yeah, I'd highly recommend those games. They're all really good fun, so check them out already. Another revival, ActRaiser, coming back. As I mentioned recently on the show, been playing Soul Blazer, which I finished. I did finish Soul Blazer and enjoyed it the whole way through. I think it's a weird game. I think it's got a lot of issues and repetition and stuff like that, but it was really cool to see the origins of like Quintet's foray into action RPGs, and ActRaiser is obviously a classic, and people love it because it was a bizarre mashup of side-scrolling action and city building and stuff like that. I don't like the art style for this at all. It looks very ugly. It reminds me a lot of the Ghosts and Goblins remake that came out earlier this year. That it's like they're bringing back these classic franchises, and they're like, but what if we gave them the ugliest art style possible? How about that? And I'm like, fucking, why? Why would you do this? There are so many better ways to remake and remaster these games. I just don't understand it.
You could even arguably, like, remaster the pixel art. And what I mean by that is, like, give it, like, an Eastward pixel art or something, you know? Like, you can improve on pixel art. Remasters don't have to be suddenly these weird, awful, like, oh, it just looks awful, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like it. And I would like to play ActRaiser at some point, but I just don't think this is the way I would like to go through it. So maybe I'll see what people say about it, but yeah, I don't know. That doesn't read as a great time to me, unfortunately. And yeah, Deltarune Chapter 2 also now out. That also just shadow dropped recently on PC. I've been meaning to get to it. There are too many fucking video games, as we all know, and I would like to replay Chapter 1 to remind myself before I play Chapter 2, because I played Chapter 1 on my laptop when I was in Edinburgh years ago, like 3 years ago I think it was, and I don't have that save file anymore.
Chapter 1 was 3 years ago,
I believe so, 2018.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so
it was like last year.
No, man, time is a flat circle. It's just like, who knows when anything happens anymore. But I don't have the save file from that laptop, and I don't want to like try and transfer it over, so I'm just going to replay on Switch, I think, because I haven't started it yet. And I downloaded it on Steam, so I downloaded Chapter 1 and 2 on Steam and just haven't had the time because I've been playing too much other stuff. So playing them on Switch sounds like a good idea. So I'm glad that they are both there now. And they're both free. And Bal, you played Undertale, right, at this point? So,
I have, yes.
I don't know if you have any interest in playing Deltarune, but it's free. So, definitely worth playing for the soundtrack alone, I would say. Toby Fox, like... I definitely get the love for Undertale, and I do really appreciate that game more and more as time goes on, but a lot of that is filtered through the fact that soundtrack is incredible and continues to just be in my brain all the time.
Am I like one of the few people on the internet who like loved Earthbound but wasn't that hot on Undertale? Or
I don't think so. I think there's definitely people out there. I don't know. I think Undertale... Definitely when I played through it, I was less hot on it. Just as time has gone on, I have more and more respect for it. Partly, I think it's because I did watch the genocide and pacifist routes on YouTube, and there's a lot more interesting stuff that comes out of that. And story-wise, just the writing is excellent. It's just a really funny, well-written game.
Yeah.
But the music transcends it, and for me, that is what is most special about that experience, is the music. I just love the soundtrack so much. And Deltarune has some fucking bangers in it. So I'm excited to play Chapter 2, if only to hear the soundtrack that he's composed, because that man can write music real good. And then a couple of other things I wanted to touch on were KOTOR is coming to Switch, the original, not the remake, clearly. This is like back to what was happening on the Wii of like, oh, everyone else.
It's a strange timing that like the PlayStation thing was just announced, and then they're like, oh yeah, the original is on Switch.
Right. It is like, oh, the big boy consoles have Final Fantasy 15. Nintendo Switch gets Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition. And it kind of feels like that. Of like, hey, here's the shitty old version. Of course, not shitty old. I played KOTOR last year, and it's incredible. It holds up. Combat does not. Combat's bad. In fact, I will go as far to say, and I did not enjoy it.
Will it run at 60 on my Series X?
Probably. I think it probably gets a bit of a boost.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I know you own this already because I for some reason I had a code from watching a Microsoft event that just randomly showed up in my app one day, and I was like, what the fuck is this for? And then I realized it was KOTOR, and I was like, well, I've played that already. Bally, you own an Xbox, take this code. So.
Sweet.
Yes, I'm interested in the KOTOR remake for sure, but it's interesting that Aspyr are also doing this port. So like they're porting the first game.
That is wild. That really
as well as remaking it, which it kind of makes sense, right? Because they're probably playing the old game a bunch while they're remaking it. They probably have to do that. So, yeah, logical to some degree. And the last thing I want to talk about is this weird fucking card game called Voice of Cards, which is from Square Enix, and it's being made by Yoko Taro. It was very kind of clear after the fact. I was like, oh wait, yeah, that music is very near adjacent, like very much near style of music, which is, if you want to talk another incredible soundtrack, the Nier Automata soundtrack, just banger after banger. It's one of those things. I think we talked about it recently of like games that I came out of being like, yeah, they're good, but like don't have the same frothing fandom as the rest of the internet does. Undertale and Nier are both two of those games, and yet with given time away from them, I kind of get it because the soundtracks for both those games are just stunning. And yeah, that's kind of the case with this game as well. It's a weird card game. I downloaded the demo. I have yet to play the demo, but I do want to check that out and try it. Maybe I talk about it in the first segment because we're recording out of order. Who knows? But yeah, anyway, Voice of Cards. It's a video game about cards. And that, I think, is probably all I wanted to cover from Nintendo Direct. Apologies to Monster Hunter fans. Though obviously we kicked off with a Monster Hunter Sunbreak thing, but neither of us have played Rise yet, and I would like to get to it, but as we continue to say, there are too many video games and I don't have time.
Also, huge apologies to Disney Magical World fans.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, apologies to the fans of Disney Magical World 2. Yeah, looked like a good video game. Final thoughts, Bally? What do you think overall of the direct?
Solid stuff. I would have found that personally a very weak direct without Kirby, but Kirby was just like that pleasant, new, fresh surprise that really sold me. So I think even if Kirby wasn't there, it was a solid direct, and just maybe not solid in like traditional sense, but just the sheer hilarity of the Mario cast and all the stuff that did on the internet was just a great spectacle in and of itself. But there's enough small stuff in there as well that I think there's something in there for everyone. I think there's a real diversity of types of games, and that's always Nintendo at their best when there's something for everyone. And yeah, I'm happy.
Cool. Yeah. I did a poll on our Twitter feed to say who will be happier with the direct announcement, and it was 60-40 in my favor. And I think that's
I think Bayo 3 swings it your way massively, and stuff. I think it does. I don't know, Delphine Chapter 2, and you were definitely hotter on the Triangle Strategy demo than me and stuff like that. Metroid Dread, obviously. So like, not that we watched that.
I think that audience correctly picked, but. It was tricky, sometimes it goes one way, sometimes it goes the other. But yeah, I definitely really enjoyed this one. I thought it was, it is the weirdest Nintendo Direct of all time. I think it's one of the most bizarre ones, from a card game by Yoko Taro to Chocobo Racing to a 3D Kirby in a post-apocalypse to fucking whatever the hell the Mario movie casting announcement was. I just still, my brain is exploding from that.
I just cannot wait for that trailer. I just want to know what this is about. Like.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm sure we'll talk about that in the future, but that will be another time. For now, we're going to get out of here and finish the show off. So, Bally, we have some fine folks to thank over on patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife for supporting the show and doing fun stuff. And you can also help do that if you go over there, and you can get some bonus episodes and stuff like that. But we would like to thank some Patreon supporters, Bally.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S, Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my wife Caroline. Thank you all for your support. And yeah, we just did an episode of ThisNintendoLife last weekend, I think that was. And yeah, you're probably wondering, like, MBZ moans about all these games coming out, but you know, like, he doesn't talk about a ton of games. It's like, that's because he talked about like 3 Nintendo games over on ThisNintendoLife. So definitely check out that show for $1 if you want to hear thoughts.
If you want to hear chat about Psychonauts 2, the Final Fantasy VII Yuffie DLC, and The Artful Escape, 3 of the best games I've played this year. kind of crazy stuff. Really, really good stuff happening right now.
And I also talked about Art of Rally, and then we did like a big discussion about the PlayStation Showcase that was like a little while ago now. So yeah, definitely check that out for $1 if you're interested. And thank you to all of our other patrons. It's usually appreciated, all the support that you give the show.
Absolutely. Speaking of support, we have some people who have written reviews on Apple Podcasts. I was going to say iTunes, but apparently it doesn't exist anymore as Apple Podcasts. So we have a couple of reviews here, very different in their approach. But I'm going to read this one from Justin from the USA, who kind of wrote a mini essay, which I do appreciate. But we said we would read out the review on the show.
Our hands are tied, so don't moan how long this is.
So the review is titled "Hoping to Grab a Pint with Bally and MBZ Someday," which I'm totally up for. If we go to an event in the US at some point when people can visit other parts of the world without dying, that would be good.
Very good.
So, Justin writes, I am certain I left a review for the superb show last year, but iTunes seems to suggest otherwise. This feedback is long overdue. These Brits generate hours of audible candy, ripe with reviews, predictions, insights, and recommendations surrounding the world of Nintendo. From the American perspective, their accents create a refined, buttoned-up delivery of all things Nintendo, until NBZ goes off the rails in his efforts to convince his co-host Bally that he is wrong when expressing a counterpoint. This is where the profanity kicks in, and it's these moments of authenticity where the podcast truly shines, as they demonstrate the excellent chemistry shared between these lifelong friends. This is not a run-of-the-mill video game podcast series. These guys are enthusiasts who bring a perspective to the table. Yes, they're Nintendo fanboys, but they openly discuss industry trends and complete games that exist on other non-Nintendo platforms, which assures the listener that their impressions do not grow from a narrow-minded point of view. Furthermore, they're open about their favourite sources of information, and they constantly offer up praise to other podcasts or journalists that inspire their creativity. Admittedly, I did not tune into ThisNintendoLife until probably somewhere around episode 150. For years, I frequently picked up and dropped podcasts dedicated to Nintendo coverage. Every other Nintendo podcast, whether it was Nintendo Power Podcast, IGN's Nintendo Voice Chat, or even the highly praised Radio Free Nintendo, left me feeling as if I was making compromises just to gain access to topics and discussions around this brand that I've dedicated way too much of my life to following. Like with practically all things Nintendo, too many other Nintendo podcasts are put through this filter of being too fake ? It's like a sense of forced joy or enthusiasm, as if the production is shackled to the idea that Nintendo cannot be critiqued too harshly, or that the production itself has to be kid-friendly. ThisNintendoLife doesn't subscribe to this philosophy, and they're the top Nintendo podcast because of it. Their show is honest, just two friends chatting about their passion, but it's delivered in a package that upholds the standards of professionalism. Cheers to you both. Well, now I feel like I have to live up to that glowing review, Bally, because that maybe
very
is
kind review, Justin.
Yes, extremely
really
generous. Very, very nice. We just said, hey, write a review if you would like, and Justin went above and beyond. So very, very highly appreciate that.
You definitely, Justin, you really touched on a lot of themes that we definitely go for with this show. That is just hugely appreciated that you appreciate those, because
I think one of those things is like we always reference other things and podcasts and shows and people, and I never really hear that done in other shows. And I don't know what it is, but I always enjoy doing that and kind of sharing my love of...
Well, if you're someone like Dan Reichert, you don't actually listen to any other video game podcasts.
Exactly, yeah. As I'm someone who is like in some ways, and don't take this the wrong way, in some ways I enjoy following video games more than I enjoy playing video games. I'm like similar to like Ben Hansen, who's another kind of voice in the industry I really respect. I just love the discussions and industry and just everything about it so much, and that's why I always mention Giant Bomb or Kind of Funny or all these other outlets that I follow, Min-Max, like that give me joy when I'm kind of listening to stuff. So
in case some listeners don't know, me and MBZ easily, I would say, certainly in my case, like the amount of podcasts I take in versus video games I play is at least 4-1, 3-1. Like, even though I play a ton of video games, I think I easily, like, multiple of 2 or 3 listen to more podcasts about video games.
Yeah, For sure. I listen to way too many, and I am very behind on all of them, and I think my current count is 170 unplayed, and it's getting out of control. I'm losing my mind. But we also had another review, much shorter and sharper and to the point. This is from the German iTunes store, and this took us a while to figure it out because we've been having trouble finding the stores. We don't go into it. Bally gave me a whole diatribe before the show about it, and it sounds like a nightmare.
If you are from the UK, US, Canada, Australia, Germany, like those are the 5 stores I'd say we check the most.
Yes,
but
yeah.
Apologies to people who don't live in those regions and nations who have reviewed us, because they're much harder to find.
If you have reviewed us and you are in like somewhere that is not one of those places, let us know and we'll go check it out. But this is from Tiloda from Germany, and their review is, my favorite Nintendo podcast, love the show, informative and funny. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And 2 very different reviews, both the same sentiment. Very, very much appreciated, because it just means that people can find the show, and if people are looking for more Nintendo chat, we're here, and we're here for you. So anyway, I think we've got other stuff to say. Twitter, you can follow us on Twitter. Find the podcast at TNL Podcast. That's where you can go to see stuff like that poll that I put up, talking about who would be happier about the Direct, as well as updates on our Patreon shows, our main shows, all that good stuff. You can find me on the internet at LordNBZ. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Fantastic. And yeah, you can find the show in various places, including iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher and all the podcasting apps that you have. Just search for This Nintendo Life. We're there. Download it, subscribe, all that good stuff, and check out the show. And I think that is pretty much it. Obviously, you can check out our Discord, check out our YouTube. I think it's been pretty good, this year so far, Bally, in terms of video games, but next time on the show, a certain video game will have been released. The first,
and played twice by MBZ.
The first 2D Metroid in 19 fucking years is coming out. At the moment, I'm going to give a shout out. Before I did a reaction to the Nintendo Direct, but I started one last playthrough of Metroid Fusion before Dread comes out, and I'm planning to finish that before Dread releases. So you can follow me, twitch.tv/LordNBZ, and I will be streaming probably a couple more times before Dread comes out, just to finish off my last playthrough of Metroid Fusion. So if you want to check that out, feel free to. But to say I'm excited would be the understatement of the century, Bally. I am heavily anticipating this game, and I hope it is good.
I'm going to watch a few YouTube videos catching up on plot stuff, because I am quite
sure whatever plot stuff there really is
there's a plot.
In the Metroid series. There's a plot.
I think they might go quite plot heavy with this one. It seems.
Yeah, it looks like it. There's cutscenes and stuff happening. I'm excited.
I hope it's a decent plot. That's what I need.
Yes, exactly. Cool. Well, that is going to close us out for the show. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. We'll be back very soon with some more podcasts and some more Nintendo. Till then, see you then. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Sam's theme from Eastward, copyright Pixpill and Chucklefish 2021.